Welcome to episode 5 of We Picked a Name. Actually, you came up with
Yeah.
this name. We're happy
Uh-huh.
with this name. We're now the Open Betas podcast with
Hell yeah.
Legal and Swim Fan. I guess the last part wouldn't necessarily be part of the title, maybe just the Open Betas podcast. If one of us,
Uh,
perishes suddenly, undergoes cardiac
yeah,
arrest,
with
and we have to
Regal.
replace. Yeah. Well, what about if it's me that undergoes cardiac arrest? You never
Shit.
know. Life
Show's
is
over.
short. Um, yeah. So this is episode 5. It's been a minute. We took a break for the holidays. What have you been up to?
Oh, opening presents,
Nice.
shoveling the driveway, and sitting around playing video games.
Oh yeah, it snows where you are. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah, it snows
unfortunate.
here. It's nice though.
I
It
hate
goes
snow.
away
Did I
really
ever tell you
fast.
that I hate snow with a
No.
fiery
Why do
passion?
you hate snow so bad?
Well, I live like you. I lived in North Dakota for way more
Oh yeah.
years than I needed to, and
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah, that would
I
do
mean,
it.
we had it. I mean, it was like worse than it is these days. Like I know apparently Minneapolis is basically just indoors, the entire downtown area or whatever. There's like sky bridges everywhere.
Yes, the
Uh,
skyways.
yeah. Um, but
Although it's
back.
gained like 20, the temperature's gone up like 20 degrees
Oh, I
since I
see.
was a
Well,
kid, so it's a little less deadly than
yeah,
it used to be.
that's also true. But yeah, we didn't have. I think the main problem for us is we didn't have indoor parking. So every day going
Oh
to
wow.
school was a struggle because you had to like heat up the car and like defrost the windows and stuff. Very annoying.
Yeah, I did
And I had
that
to like
growing up
shovel snow.
in high school too. Yeah.
Yeah, etc. Just a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's a huge pain in the ass, and it makes it miserable to go outside.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Cool. So, oh, I guess I should say what I did for the holidays, which is nothing except
Yeah.
for so I mentioned I played Lost Ark, the new raid
Uh-huh.
on NA, Rosha's release. So that's what's been occupying my time. Bunch of Lost Ark. Um, anyway, so for
Cool,
today, our
cool.
topic of choice was fighting games.
Hwah!
Well, a fighting game. So you got into well, actually, we probably started. If you count me playing Street Fighter 2 in an arcade in China at like age 4, we
Yeah, I
probably
count
started maybe even around the same time. But obviously, your experience with Street Fighter 2
Right.
is way different than mine. So I just wanted to, before we start, just want to give a quick summary of what is a fighting game.
Okay.
So the easiest way, as usual, to describe these things is just to give you the names of games. So Street
Hmm.
Fighter, Tekken, Soul Calibur, Mortal Kombat, Smash. Well, so for the purposes of this discussion, we're gonna count Smash as a fighting game because I
Yeah,
think it
I mean
hits
it
most
breaks
of
some of
the
the rules, but yeah,
yeah
it's a fighting game,
yeah.
I'd say.
So if you ever seen any of these games, KOF, King of Fighters, Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear, Skullgirls, Marvel vs. Capcom, these are fighting games. If you've
Yeah.
seen them, you know what they are, and you don't really need to be describing them to you. But if I were to kind of summarize the rules or like defines a fighting game. Um, the one is that they're competitive, right? In other words, there's a winner
Hmm.
and a loser,
Yeah.
and I think that's pretty universal in these things. Which is actually a pretty tough starting point, right? Because that's already a hard barrier for a lot of uh, players to get over.
It being competitive at all?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
being able to lose to someone in the first place, right?
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Okay.
So, for example, like ladder anxiety was a big thing in like StarCraft.
What is this? So it refers to like just the anxiety of getting higher up or on the ladder or what?
Of basically like hitting the ranked match button and playing a game against another person and potentially losing, right?
Don't
Uh,
but the real competitors, they get a thrill out of that feeling, don't they?
yeah, they do. Yeah. The problem, of course, is that we can't just make games only for the real. Well, we can if we want to, but as a
It's
starting
not,
point, you may not want to make a game only for the quote unquote real competitors, right?
yeah, if you've got enough quote unquote real competitors for keeping you in business.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, and this is something I believe, like if you want to make a game for only the real competitors, I mean, more power to you. I think it can work. I
Oh,
think
of
there's
course.
enough.
Yeah.
But but as a starting point, like I don't necessarily think you I don't think you should start but with the assumption that you're going to exclude all the people that are not real competitors.
Right, right.
And then the next one is it's usually 1v1. So there's a lot of competitive games that are team based. Fighting games almost exclusively are not team based. Like there's team formats, but the core gameplay is almost usually 1v1, right?
Yeah, and even if you've got like a team thing going, like King of
Mhm.
Fighters, it's still one
Yeah.
player versus one player.
And like they have like Street Fighter Cross Tekken did this like funny tournament where they like when you tagged in the character, you tagged in your teammate.
Uh-huh.
But like
Oh,
those
wow.
are like one-off tournaments, and those are kind of memes, right?
And that's
They
only if
kind
you
of
follow the offline rule
yeah,
to do
exactly.
that. Okay.
Yeah. So they're usually 1v1. They're usually round based. So they're obviously they're based on well, I guess you might know this, but from my perspective, they're obviously based on real combat sports, right? Like
Hmm,
boxing.
hmm.
So a lot of what goes on in them is very similar to the rules of actual combat sports. So round based, like boxing, boxers go for I don't know what it is. I don't watch combat sports, but like 2 minutes probably, and then they take a break, right? And
Hmm.
then someone wins the 2 minutes that goes on the scorecard, and then you take a break and you go again. And fighting games follow the same pattern,
Yeah.
almost all of them, right? So in Smash it's stocks, but which is slightly different. But in Street Fighter, Tekken, for example, you start each round with some amount of health. You punch each other. One person loses all their health. You win the round, but you don't win the game, right? You keep playing for some number of rounds until you win the game.
Right.
Uh, 3 out of 5, 2 out of 3, something like that.
So everyone gets another chance, or if you felt
Yep.
like you were, rushed down, you can
Hmm.
come back and change your strategy for a
Yep.
round.
You get a fresh start. And very similar also to boxing, you have a triangle, like a Fire Emblem weapon triangle, which is attack, block, throw, right? And this one is not universal,
Mm.
but even Smash has some version of this, where it's like to do damage, you have to do an attack. If you're in a bad position or your attack is weaker than the opponent, or or your opponent's using a risky attack, you can block, right, to put yourself in an advantage state,
Hmm.
and not take damage if you predict it. And then if the opponent is blocking, you can throw, which usually has some drawback, like you can't combo out of it, or it's very short range, but you beat a block, right? Because otherwise you could block
Yeah,
forever.
you can beat a turtling opponent
Right.
with some throws if they're just
Yep.
constantly blocking.
Exactly. And so that's normally the pair, and that I think that follows. I don't know anything about combat sports, so this analogy is
I don't
uh,
really either.
might go off the rails, but I think that generally follows a lot of like strategy and combat sports. But again, I don't know anything, so
I mean that they seem very related, and I think
yeah.
it's the time limit is another like really related
Hmm.
thing.
Oh,
You,
right.
you
Yeah.
can't just mess around
Hmm.
indefinitely, and it just
Yep.
means it forces aggression. It forces a
Yep.
forward
Yep.
movement
Exactly.
rather than sitting back and waiting for the other guy to make a mistake.
And that's well, to some it stops that from it happening to an extreme extent, right? But obviously that still happens.
True,
And the
true.
thing, yeah, and that's the other thing. The rounds are short, right? Like in boxing, it's like
Hmm.
instead of if a basketball game is like 2 hours of real time, a match of boxing is usually not anywhere close to that, right? I think. I'm pretty sure it's not.
Uh, I don't
I
think
don't
so. I
actually
think
know.
you can't really.
Um,
Uh,
but yeah, the rounds in fighting games are similar, right? Like instead of a game of Dota or a game of League that takes like 30 to 45 to 60 minutes, each round
mhm.
you can just be done and determine a winner in 99 seconds usually, right? Or some
Yeah,
variation
I
of.
think I'm looking it up here. It looks like boxing is usually a minute or to a minute and a half rounds,
Okay.
or length rounds, and
Hmm.
the world championship fights can go as long as 15 rounds, but
I
uh,
see. Okay.
the lowest amount, like I guess, is the bantamweight, which is 3 rounds of 1 minute each.
Oh, interesting. That's so short. Wow.
Yeah,
Surprising.
yeah, it's like
Um,
punch out.
yeah, it is. And the other paradigm, moving back to this list of things about fighting games, is there's usually three concepts that are always there, which is like hit stun, meaning if you get hit, you can get hit again, which is how combos exist, right?
Hmm.
If you get hit, you can't do anything for some amount of time, and they can hit you again, or they put you in disadvantage. There's
Yeah,
recovery, which is like if you miss, you can get hit, right?
Yeah, or even if you
or
don't miss, there's still a
right,
recovery
right.
of
Or
you getting back to
if you
being
get
able to
blocked, right,
hit
you can
again.
get hit out of it. And then there's also startup, which is like, uh, you know, there's some amount of time before your attack comes out. Like throwing a punch, you have to wind up the punch, right? Or you can throw a short punch that does less damage. Similarly, there's this idea that like you have to wait some amount of time before your attack comes out, and you can get hit during that. Uh,
Right. And there's
now,
some, and also there's the concept of like invincibility frames that
mhm,
can be in a startup or at
right,
some point in your special that you want to work
yep.
around.
There's a lot of this basic system gives a lot of room for additions, right? Like invincibility, like you said, or
Hmm.
reversal, things like that. But
Hmm.
almost basically all games have start with this kind of concept, and I think that's also important because it lends consistency to the game, right? Like you can study the game and learn the numbers behind all these things, and it's important for the competition that these things are consistent.
Yes.
For now, right? I think it's possible to have something that's not, but usually all fighting games have very consistent, um, they call it we call it frame data. Um,
Do they not?
Other word.
Because I know they make balance changes nowadays in
Mhm.
like Street Fighter games. Do they not change?
They do. But what I mean is like within the round, it's consistent, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in a given patch, for example, like it's always going to be the same. So you can
Yes.
kind of learn and calculate
Yeah,
certain
there's
things and
predictability to
situations.
it. Okay.
Yeah. The last thing is actually not the last thing. One more thing. It's a game of open information, like chess. There's no and similarly zero to no to very little RNG, right?
Mm.
Which is
Yeah,
you
is
know
there any luck that way? Like,
yeah, there can be. So like for example, Smash has a ton of RNG if you
oh,
play the
sure,
casual
sure.
mode, right?
Yeah.
In older Smash games, not Ultimate, some stages have RNG where it's like it
Right.
changes at a random time, or a spaceship flies by and shoots you, right?
But in
Um,
our sort of like classic fighting games,
mhm.
is there anything like that? Like, is there a randomness when you both throw the same thing at the same time, maybe?
So those interactions tend to work the same way. They tend to work consistently, not necessarily predictably, but consistently.
Okay.
There is sometimes randomness built into characters, though, or within the game systems. Sometimes
Hmm.
there's randomness. So item characters, for example, I think Faust is no longer random in Strive, but a character that throws it's a common trope motif to have a character that throws a set of items. You press the
Hmm.
command that throws an item, and it throws a random item, right?
Ah, okay,
Um,
okay.
I think a lot of games these days throw items in a certain order, not randomly. But anyway,
Hmm.
RNG does exist, but it's very very low, right? And definitely not anything close to the RNG of a card game. And it's still open information, as in you can't hide anything from your opponent, right? You can see
Yeah, I guess
everything that
the
you're
only
doing.
thing you can hide is you doing the button inputs leading up to a super or something.
Right, right, yeah,
But
yeah.
that's about it.
But
You can see everything the
mhm,
person is doing.
right, you can see everything they're doing, and most importantly, you know everything they're capable of doing, right? Which I
Yep.
guess is true of a lot of closed information games as well. But um, I think
And
it's
that's another, kind of barrier to entry is
hmm
to
hmm
really be good, you not only have to know your character, you want to know everyone's character that you
it's
might go up
true.
against.
That is true. We'll talk a lot about barrier to entry coming up if we get there.
Okay, I'll
We have a
stop
lot of stuff to
interrupting.
get there. No. Go keep interrupting. That's the
Oh,
whole
okay.
point. Next thing is there's a variety of moves. So that's not true of like there are some fighting games that are like toy games. I like to call them. Like they're there to like demonstrate a concept, like dive kick. If you've heard of dive kick or
Yes, I have.
footsies,
I haven't heard
those
of
those are
footsies, but
pretty
I think
much
I
the
get what
fighting
it
games.
is.
But for most quote unquote serious fighting games, right? There's a large variety of moves. There's a lot of options, and you get all of them at the same time. That's in contrast to card games where you also have a lot of options, a ton of options, right? You have 10,000 options, and then you put 60 of them or 40 of them or whatever into your deck, and then from the
Hmm.
deck at any given time you only have the options in your hand, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
right. Okay. Yeah.
Fighting games, you have all your options at the same time, and usually you have 10, 20, 30. In Tekken, I think every character has like 30, 40 moves. But um,
Yeah, so it gives more variation in
right.
strategy, I guess, or more
Well,
options at least.
maybe that's a good topic. I have some thoughts about this idea of like false um, customizability.
Okay,
Like
cool.
if you look at have you played Path of Exile?
No.
Have you seen Path of Exile?
Let me see. I don't think I have. I know of it,
Have
but
you
that's
heard
about
of
it.
Path of? Who are you?
I've
You
heard of it. I've heard of it.
okay? Okay,
I
okay.
know it exists. Is it like a Diablo?
Yeah, it's a Diablo clone. It's like a free to
Okay, and it's a
play
free to play.
MMO
All right.
style Diablo clone.
Yeah. Okay. No, I've never played
Anyway,
it.
Path of Exile made this is a total tangent. Path of Exile made kind of waves because it has this gigantic talent tree, like League of Legends talents, right? Like you press
Hmm.
this node and you get like an ability, and you don't get the other ones. It has a gigantic talent tree, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's so cool! You can build your character however you want because there's like trillions of options." But in reality, there's not actually trillions of options, right? Like you certain talents central around each other, or
Okay.
like centralize. So it's like, oh, my goal is to, I know I need to get this one specific thing because it's the best out of, even if there's 10,000 options, there's still one that's the best option. And the variety is not as high as you might
Right, because
expect given just
the
the number
meta
of,
may lean towards a certain
right,
way of doing it.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I'm looking at this skill tree. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Although it
It's
says there's
huge.
passive stuff in it too. So
Yeah, there's passives. I don't know too much about PoE. Like I dabbled in it barely, but it'd be an interesting topic. And the very last thing I want to say is like skill difference correlates very strongly with your win percentage, right?
yeah.
This is a sliding scale. Chess, for example, is a game
Mm.
where skill difference correlates even more with win percentage than fighting games, right? A
Uh,
game like StarCraft.
why would that be? Why would chess
Oh,
be even higher skill?
because in a lot of, well, I guess it depends. Number one, but for example, you can make input errors in even the best players make input errors in fighting games, right?
Yes.
Um, and you can die for that. In chess, it can still happen. It does still happen, but fundamentally, you can't make an input error. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you can make it what they call it a mouse slip, where you click. If you're playing online, you click the wrong button, right?
Right. Right.
But fundamentally, at a high level, you can't make an input error, for example.
Yeah.
So
You
chess,
can fumble getting out your super, but you're not going to
right,
fumble moving your queen
right,
to the spot.
exactly. Um,
I mean, I guess you could. People don't.
right, right, yeah. And then there's things like you can do some like tactics in fighting games that allow you to win just by guessing, right? Like there's still RNG in the
Mhm.
sense that like you can just do a wake up super 3 times and hit your opponent 3 times. Well, obviously you can't usually do a super 3 times in one round, but anyway, like you can take tactics that allow you to beat a more fundamentally sound player.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's interesting. There's the concept of button mashing in fighting
hmm
games,
Button
but
mashing, exactly.
not in chess in
Right,
the same way.
exactly.
Like, and a button masher could conceivably beat a
Yes.
pretty good person just
Yep.
because they have no idea what to expect and
hmm
they don't follow the strategies that are normally out there.
Yep, exactly. And they can beat a better person once, right? It's going to be hard
Yeah,
to do it consistently, but that's
yes.
why the correlation is like how much does your skill difference correlate with win percentage, right? In chess, it's almost 100%. It's hard to imagine it being, if the skill difference is very large, it's hard to imagining the more skilled player ever losing if they're
Right,
taking it
right.
seriously, right?
Unless
Whereas
they
in
do
fighting
that.
games, okay, they might lose 5% of the time, right?
I
Um,
see, I see.
right.
Unless they're doing that
Depending.
that vibrating anal bead thing that chess players
Right. That is a rumor.
But yeah, it's not
But yeah,
true.
that is
I doubt it's true. It
that is
sounds
pretty
crazy,
that is pretty relevant.
but what a rumor to get off the ground. I mean,
Hmm.
just with no evidence.
Yeah.
It's like
I
the
there's a
Richard Gere
video by
thing.
the person who is credited with spreading that rumor. He made a
Really?
video about how it turned into this big thing, and he doesn't know what to do about it. He basically just said it on stream as a joke. It got clipped and it got shipped to all the newspapers, and it became a thing. So
It wasn't the opponent that did it. It
no, no, no. It was
was
just a
just
streamer. It
somebody.
was Eric Hansen from a channel called Chess Bras.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
he just made it as a joke when talking about the situation, and he got
That's
clipped and
funny.
shipped. Yep.
Clipped and shipped. Yeah. Huh.
Yep. Okay, yeah, so those are kind of the summaries of like if we talk about what are the pillars of a fighting game, those are kind of what I came up with, right?
Yeah, I can't
Uh,
think of anything else.
mhm. And so as we continue through the conversation, um, you know, and again, the thing is like a fighting game to be considered a fighting, you can break one or two of these rules. You can
Hmm.
maybe break three or four of them, but once you get to a certain point, it stops looking like a fighting game, right? Which might be fine, but that's kind of the definition we'll roll with.
Yeah, the original Street Fighter that no one's played, it didn't have throws, so it didn't have the nice triangle
I
with
think I
attack,
know
block,
this actually.
throw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you could do a lot of blocking.
I love blocking. I'm a professional
Yeah.
blocker. And then the thing about being a professional blocker is you can always complain when you get hit. It's like complaint equity. It's an Ellis
Wait,
Griffin.
you complain when you get what do you mean? You can always complain when you get hit.
Yeah, because blocking is honorable, right? And rushing down is dishonorable. So if you're
Is
blocking a
that what
lot
people say?
and and so if you're blocking, you're doing the honorable thing, right? So as soon as you get hit when you're blocking, you can just complain. It's like, wow, that's such a dirty mix-up that you hit me with.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's it.
this concept of honorability, I am not aware. I'm not aware of it in fighting
Oh,
games.
oh, in fighting games, there's a ton of uh, thoughts about what's honorable and what's not.
Interesting.
It's
Usually,
actually
when people say that, I write down, okay, do the dishonorable things to win.
right. Well, that's true. That is how like there's a lot of characters. I think this one you probably are familiar with. There's a lot of characters that are considered dishonorable, right, because of their play style. These are usually like gimmicky, rushdown, guesswork characters, or
Yes, yes.
very, very top tier characters, right?
Yeah, I guess I
These
would.
two,
I guess I would always use the word cheap.
yeah, exactly. Cheap, cheap, imbalanced, dishonorable.
Yeah, even
Uh,
an idiot
etc.
could have done that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Which
Yeah,
is kind of
okay.
the point. But yeah, so uh, and then before we start, to give some context to the rest of the discussion, I want to really quickly run through what games we've played. So I got into
Mm.
fighting games from watching Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3. And I played the game, but I was, this is my first game. I didn't have anyone to teach me, so I played it for like 20 hours
Hmm.
and was
Hmm.
really bad. I played Skullgirls, Street Fighter 4, BB Tag. Those are the ones I put the most time in.
BB
Recently,
tag
I played.
is what's BB?
Oh, is Blaze Blue Cross
Oh,
Tag
Blaze
Battle.
Blue. Okay.
It's
Yes.
the super casual Blaze Blue game.
Okay.
Nevertheless, I had a lot of fun. Recently, I played Guilty Gear Strive for like 30 hours or so, and I dabbled in more anime fighting games. I've played Smash a decent amount, but I never took it that seriously. And I dabbled in Street Fighter 5 as well.
Is Smash 4 the Wii one?
Yeah, Smash 4, aka Super Smash Brothers for the Nintendo Wii U. Quite what a catchy name.
Oh, they didn't give it a
No, they
subtitle like for
didn't.
all.
The
Oh, wow.
They released it twice, which we'll actually talk about. They released it as Super Smash Brothers for Nintendo 3DS and Super Smash Brothers for Nintendo Wii U. Just a great,
Right, they did. I
what
remember that.
absolutely great. I want to hear what you think about this branding, actually.
Well, isn't it like, aren't they essentially two separate games?
Yes, but only because of well, no, in that they kind of work the same. They're supposed to work the same.
Hmm.
But yes, in the sense that like the 3DS limitations were so big that there's a lot of differences, like engine differences.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. What about you? What have you played in your time?
So I don't have a good memory of how much I've played each of these,
Sure,
but
that's
I
fine.
can try to discuss it. So I played all the Street Fighters. I mean, I guess I've actually played five as well. So I played Street Fighter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Street Fighter 2 was probably the most hours I sunk into a
Right.
fighting game
And
when I was a kid.
you played in the actual arcades, right?
I played at home on the Super
Oh, I
Nintendo
see.
and
Okay.
in arcades, yeah. And I
Okay.
played in
Okay.
arcades. I was still a little young to go to like
Gotcha. Gotcha.
the smoking teenager arcades at
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
mall,
Got it.
and I was a little cowardly about approaching an older kid to play them.
Sure.
So,
Sure. Sure.
but I would
It's
play my
totally
brothers and
reasonable.
I'd play my friends. So, and when we went together to an arcade, we'd play each other.
Got
So
it.
yeah, a lot of that one. I played. quite a bit of Street Fighter 3 as well, but I was never really any good at it. Same with 4. Like I got good enough to play and beat my friends some of the time, but that's about it. If I played someone in an arcade or online in those games, I'd just get my ass kicked.
Right.
Uh, so there was also Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. These were big American-centered hits
Yeah.
uh, because there was an, if you're not aware, there's an over focus on like violence and gore in them. So
Yes.
you tearing somebody's spine out or tearing their arms off at the end of the match or stuff like that, and big drops of blood falling from the sky
Mm-hmm.
and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I played a good amount of that too, and it was in arcades in my hometown, so I played that in arcades. I played a ton of Super Smash Brothers, the original, that on N64.
Smash
That was
64.
one I
Yeah.
got really good at. I entered tournaments and did pretty well
Oh,
in
who
college.
did you play? Who did you play?
Kirby, so there was no way I was gonna win.
Okay. I, isn't
Basically,
Kirby like
you look,
not bad in 64? He's
Kirby's
like,
good. He's real good,
yeah,
but he's
yeah,
not gonna win against Fox. Like
yeah,
it's just not gonna happen,
yeah.
unfortunately. So I never learned the Fox I should have. I learned Donkey Kong, which is
I
sort of
think
that, but
I think the top tier character in 64 is actually Pikachu.
oh, is that right? Interesting.
Yeah,
That's good.
like
I like him better
well,
than Fox. He's
yeah,
fast as hell
well, yeah.
though.
Fox is the thing.
And I played Brawl somewhat, but I
Hmm.
haven't had like the in-person friends to play a lot of these
Right.
in-person friends who still play video games.
Mhm.
Uh, Soul Calibur 2 I played a lot of when it was on the Dreamcast. That was a big high school and college game. Uh, Again, I was never very good at it, but I guess I was okay. Capcom versus SNK 1 and 2. I loved those games. I played in a couple tournaments in college in CVS 2. Uh, SVC Chaos is a little known game that is basically the inverse of Capcom versus SNK.
Right,
It's SNK's version of the crossover.
right.
Uh, and it's a really, I mean, I enjoy the animations of the game and the fact that it has every single player battle, every single matchup, between the different characters has a different little intro conversation that I thought was
Oh,
fun.
interesting. Okay.
They like talk to each other depending on who you're talking to, uh, and it has cool crossover stuff because I'm a sucker for that.
Hmm.
This game never got popular because it had fundamental problems, like
Okay. Yeah.
the system where if you block an attack and you use a little bit of meter, you can essentially dash forward and start an attack of your own while your opponent
Ah,
is still recovering,
I
which
see. So
makes
it's
it
like
really easy to. It was way too easy to do, essentially.
right.
And then I played a little King of Fighters here and there, but yeah, not a ton. That was an arcade only thing.
So we actually basically you played Smash 1, Smash 64 the way I played Brawl, which is like, oh, my friends, it's like high school years, you just
Yeah,
go to hang out at people's houses to get away from despair at home. So,
yeah.
you go to their houses and you just play a bunch of Smash and you like uh talk
Get some
about
pizza,
stuff that you don't really understand about like how the game works and who's the best. So,
get some
it's
pizza, soda. It's fun time.
yep. And I think you know a little bit about this. What is the history of fighting games? So my impression is basically that, well, first of all, they're arcade games first and foremost,
Hmm.
right? When
Yeah,
arcades were
they were
big,
quarter munchers.
yeah. And my understanding is that they kind of evolved from beat 'em ups. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, well, okay.
That
Um,
makes a certain amount of sense, though.
that's. I feel like I read that somewhere. I should have done more research, I guess, but that's my impression.
Well, Street Fighter 2 was like the big first breakout
Right,
hit of these, and it was a Capcom game as well.
right,
And they did a bunch of beat 'em ups like Final Fight, so I
right.
wouldn't be surprised.
I think that's true. I'll look it up and maybe if I'm wrong, I'll revisit in a later episode.
Yeah,
You
and beat
wanted
'em
to.
ups, when we say
Mhm.
beat 'em ups, we're talking about like a side-scrolling,
Yep.
usually cooperative,
Yeah.
where you're punching and kicking through hordes of enemies
Yep.
and doing little combos and smashing people on stuff.
So you mentioned Final Fight. The only one I remember ever playing as a kid is like Double Dragon, if if I recall
Oh yeah,
correctly.
Double Dragon, great.
But
I
you know,
remember the
it
Double
was very
Dragon
good.
arcade had a couple of spots where there was like where you're actually required to like jump over a hole, and
Mm.
if you fell in the hole, you would die and your quarter was gone. So it felt really terrible. And
Platforming
these
in my beat 'em up.
exactly,
Coincidentally,
yeah, it was
I
horrible.
want we'll talk about platforming in fighting games,
Oh,
um,
like Smash.
like Smash. Yeah. And you wanted to mention that buffering inputs is actually a bug.
Well, before we get into that, I just wanted to say that beat 'em ups are kind of a side favorite genre for me.
Really? Okay.
I've actually made an effort to try to play every beat 'em up that's ever been made
River
with
City Girls.
say again?
River City Girls.
Yes, I did play River City Girls. I like that one.
Nice.
That's good.
Did you know that there's beat 'em ups are a very popular genre for kind of like low budget hentai games, like
I
indie
did not
Japanese
know
hentai
that.
games.
I've not played
Uh,
those. I assume it's good. Yeah, they're like kind of simpler to make than
yeah,
other things.
yep, yep. Um, I when I used to play these like low budget, like really honestly like shitty, but sometimes good indie hentai games out of Japan, like beat 'em ups are very
Uh-huh.
popular. There's one in particular that's good. I don't, for sponsorship reasons, if it goes on YouTube, I guess we can't talk too much about it. But
Oh,
in fact, maybe
oh,
we
talking
maybe we
about
should just
hentai?
exclude this in the yeah. Um,
Is that so? They don't like being associated with that stuff? I guess not.
I think yeah. Well, pornography is banned obviously on YouTube.
Oh, right.
But I think our discussion is pretty safe.
Yeah, it's related. Yeah, we're not
But
showing it.
getting into like recommendations and links and stuff maybe too hard. So
Yeah. Okay.
we'll discuss more later. So have you played Dungeon Fighter Online? I was gonna skip this, but now that you mentioned you like beat 'em ups,
I did play a little, but it's a huge treadmill of leveling
yes,
up,
it's
right?
an
Like I,
MMO, right? It's like an
yeah.
MMO fighting game beat 'em up.
And as I maybe have said on the show before, I avoid getting into MMOs when
Right,
I can because it
right.
has no ending and I have no willpower to
Sure,
stop.
yeah, that's totally fair. Well, you quit Lost Ark pretty well, so
Yep.
maybe you
I
do.
followed my plan.
Yep.
It was
Uh,
good. That was a good amount. I had fun, but
yeah, I
yeah, it
think
was
you
definitely
stopped
not.
right when all the non MMO players stop, which is at the end of the story, which is totally fine. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's there for. Oh, so DFO I think is a very interesting topic that we'll come back to because
Hmm.
DFO, for example, has a tournament scene, um,
Oh, isn't
a
aren't you?
competitive tournament scene in Korea. Not very big, but it exists, and it's
Don't you have
balanced and
like
competitive.
levels and stats in that?
You
Is there like a
do, you
maximum to
do.
reach?
There should be. I don't know, but I think yes, there is a maximum you can reach, and maybe the tournament has like separate rules, separate servers, whatever. But
I see. Yeah,
um,
to even the playing field.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
and
it's interesting. It's definitely a game I would have played if I
right,
were younger.
yeah, maybe if you were in like college or high school.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. If I could be like, hey, I get my friends to play it too and stuff.
hmm hmm Next thing is, I think there's a fair and generally true perception that fighting games are not
Ooh,
popular.
I'm gonna stop you again. We just to hit on buffering
Oh,
inputs as
oh,
a
right,
bug.
right, right. I forgot.
Yeah, in Street Fighter 2, it was not intended to do combo moves, meaning specifically when you hit your opponent with something, you can
Hmm.
follow up with more hits before they
Right.
can react, essentially.
Hmm.
Their hits done, like you said. And those there were many of them in the game, but they were specific to specific characters, so it wasn't like uh, super balanced. And
Right.
it basically just, if you were really skilled and you learned when you could, essentially cancel moves, so that you don't have to do the recovery frames, this comboing was possible. And they
Right.
left it in. They almost took it out because they were like, well, this gives an advantage if you know how to do it. But then
Right.
they left it in as like, hey, maybe people will discover this. And it was still considered an arcade game too. So and they assumed people wouldn't be just like sitting down at their console
Right.
trying everything. Uh,
little
And
did
then
they
yeah,
know.
after they saw that people really liked it, they made it a mainstay even in future Street Fighter 2 releases because they did Hyper and Turbo and all that. And I'm pretty sure by Hyper they had added a combo meter and just made it like a real part of it.
So many things happen totally by accident, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
think the
fun.
most important thing is to, this goes for all parts of life, just to, when you see something that you, even if it's not intentional, that is obviously good, just leave it alone,
Yeah,
or lean
might
into
get
it.
might get
Don't be
penicillin.
Nintendo and just try to cancel it.
Yeah, exactly. Fear of the unknown.
Yeah,
All
so
right, I'm
that's, I
done.
didn't know that actually. That's I think I knew a little, like some like hint of that, but I didn't know the whole story. So that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, back to what I was about to talk about, which is there's a perception that fighting games are not that popular, right? So Smash obviously is the exception if we count it as a fighting game. So I
Hmm.
just really quickly pulled up some sales numbers from the VG sales fandom. I didn't check the sources, so take these with a grain of salt. But so Ultimate Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is at the top with 28 million, and Street Fighter 2 is at 15, right below it. And if we kind of go to the first big fighting game, which is Mortal Kombat, which I knew Mortal Kombat was super popular, but I'm very interested in why you think it's done so well sales wise. I think it was like the best selling game of 2021 or something.
Um, I'm wondering if these numbers look low to me. I wonder if they're US only.
Maybe. I honestly, like I said, there's no sources. I could only,
Okay,
I just pulled up
okay.
these numbers. They might be US only. I think I know these are software only as well. I don't know what that means necessarily, but
As in like digital
digital
downloads, or
probably. It's probably
I don't know.
digital. Yeah, I don't know.
Which
At a
would
later
make
date
Street
we
Fighter
can.
2 way too under um,
Yeah,
estimated.
that's also true. I don't know. So we can do some real research and get in these later. But just to get a ballpark, Ultimate is at 28. The best-selling modern fighting games: Mortal Kombat 10 and 11, Tekken 7, Street Fighter 4. Surprisingly, maybe these are
I'm
all.
not surprised about that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either.
They
But
did a ton
it
of
might be.
marketing for it.
But they did for Street Fighter 5 as well, and it's half of Street Fighter 4. Um,
Yeah, Street Fighter 5 kind of kind of sucks a bit,
it kind of
unfortunately.
sucked. Well, I think it's good now, but it did suck at release very much, and that
Oh, it did
that
it?
kind of killed
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I
I
actually
think it
watched.
just honestly, I just don't think it looks as good as 4. The
That's
4 had
true.
a style that
Mhm.
was cool, and then they like turned it off. It's like they turned off the cool style and just made 3D characters that don't look
Yeah,
great.
that I agree with. That I agree with. I think
And
six
it
looks
also
even worse, by
takes
the way.
oh yeah, I should look again. I've and also Street Fighter 5 the time I mean a very important aspect of your fighting game if you make one is the time it fucking takes to have a rematch, to choose characters and get
Oh
into a new
yes,
match. And it takes a fucking it takes so long in
yes,
in Street Fighter 5 and they
yes,
have like ads during the load. It sucks.
yes.
It's horrible. Anyway.
That is one of the biggest community complaints. It's still, they're not going to fix it obviously because they're working on Street Fighter 6, and it is baffling how
It's
that still
nuts.
exists.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
Yeah, it is baffling. But anyway, so Tekken 7, MKX, MK11, Street Fighter 4, some other Tekkens, Dragon Ball is up here. They're all around 10 million, which is like a third of Ultimate, right? So um,
Oh yeah,
I
Dragon
think
Ball.
yeah, and I think if we look at broader data, I think the trend will still generally be the case, which is like traditional fighting games. Ultimate obviously is made, or Smash in general is obviously made to have a broad casual appeal. It does, and it has three times the sales of even the most popular traditional fighting games.
Yeah, I mean that was a breakout hit, right? Like they were
Mhm.
trying something pretty new feeling with a crossover of all their characters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a,
it
yeah.
hits. I think it hits. Really, it hit all three categories of what makes a well selling, well enough to make this list fighting game. Which is well, first of all, there's just big fighting game franchises. These are like historic franchises. right?
Hmm.
Tekken and Street Fighter, they have a long history, so they're kind of things unto themselves. So they sell well just because of the history and the continued quality.
Hmm.
Um, there's games on this list that have a broad casual appeal. So Smash obviously is at the top of that, but there's things like ARMS, um,
Yeah, their new
which
their Switch game. Well,
yeah,
new.
the Switch game, which is okay, it's may not actually be a fighting game, but it counts well enough, right? It's sort of
Yeah,
still a competitive
yeah.
1v1 game. Like Pokken Tournament, the Pokemon fighting game, similar. I don't know how difficult it is, for example, but I think in general these things have a lot of these games have casual appeal. And then the other thing is a lot of the most successful games are franchises that made a fighting game on the side. So like you mentioned, Dragon Ball.
Mm.
Um, Smash obviously also fits this category because it took all of Nintendo's IP and put them in a fighting game,
Yes. Yeah, it
which really
definitely leaned
contributes
into
to
that
its
hard. Yeah,
yeah, which I think really contributes to its success even now. Like for example, a lot of
for
people
sure.
in the Melee community are like, okay, we can just make a one-to-one clone of Melee, but I really just
Uh-huh.
want to see Kirby punch Fox, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
and
kind of
even like
iconic.
people that don't play a lot of video games are like, sometimes they have like a favorite Nintendo character,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's
Yep.
like, oh, I want to play as Yoshi or whatever. If you're really
Exactly.
lame. Yeah.
And that's I think that contributes a lot to the success of things like Marvel vs. Capcom is another one, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, it was a good game, but a lot of the follow-ups that were not good also did well, just because it's like, oh, I can play Magneto and
Yeah.
fight Wolverine, right?
And
Uh,
people, game companies are still trying to bite that style
oh
and
yeah,
making
that's
new
true. I
games
mean,
with
there's just an
the
X Men.
Nickelodeon one, the
Oh
Sony
oh,
one.
that's true. Yeah yeah yeah.
There
Nick
was a
All Stars.
PlayStation one, right? With like Uncharted characters and stuff.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
um,
What was it called? Like
interesting.
Sony Brawl? It
Injustice.
sucked.
Oh,
No,
oh,
not
I see.
Injustice.
Well,
That's PC, right?
that sounds like a kusoge. So,
I mean, it was, yeah, All Star Battle Royale. All Stars Battle Royale.
I see. This
PlayStation
actually.
All Stars. Yeah, of course.
Oh, never mind. I know about this like vaguely. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a bunch
So
of, it's like half the characters you don't know, you've never even heard of. So,
I think yeah, Smash neatly fits into all these categories, which I think is a big part of why it's done well. Obviously, it's also just a fun game, right? All the games have
yeah.
been okay. All the games maybe except for Brawl have been like very good games with depth and complexity and fun, just fun to
Yeah, and
play. And
they feel slick, like they feel
hmm
very well made and
right,
packed with stuff.
right.
I'm
So
surprised. I guess I'm not surprised, but it's funny to not see any Killer Instinct games on here.
yeah, that's true. I think maybe just KI kind of dropped, like stopped making games for a while. Like there was a KI like 2016, and I think that's kind of been it, right? Um,
Yeah, it probably just never did especially
yeah.
well.
Similar with Soul Calibur, right? Like the modern Soul Caliburs kind of dropped off here as well. I think two things are both true, which is that they do have a high barrier to entry. I think that lines up here, right? Like, um,
Hmm.
for example, like Tekken 7, very popular game, is only a third of Ultimate for sales. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is about the same as ARMS. MVC 3 has all the Marvel characters and had a very high viewership on Twitch for a while.
Hmm.
But, you know, and has actual prizes and actual competitive scene. But ARMS, the total casual game with no competitive scene, the biggest ARMS tournament, I looked this up, had $200 in prizes in
Two,
Nintendo gift code.
200,
Yeah,
200.
it was an official Nintendo event. They
Ouch.
sponsored it by giving it $200 in prizes, and it was only in the form of Nintendo Shop gift codes, so not
Oof.
even
All right.
money. So
Yeah, so
obviously,
it's not a breakout success, in other words.
right. The competitive scene definitely was not right, but that's also a Nintendo thing. But anyway, the kind of point is
Yeah.
like this highly successful competitive game with a big viewership, following 800 people traveling to Evo to watch it. Sales wise, it did the same as this ARMS game, right? Um, so
When did Evo start broadcasting all their matches online? From the beginning or
I don't know.
later
From the
on?
beginning, I would get. I mean, as
Okay.
soon as they could. I think at
Yeah.
some point you had to like down like they pass around CDs with the VODs. Like you could get the
Oh wow.
Evo VODs mailed to you, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. But ever since it was possible, they've done it.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the barrier to entry to even start playing this game hurts the sales, right? Um, I
Yes.
think I think if you've talked to people that don't want to play fighting games, we know people, our friends are similar like this. It's like I don't want to put in the time to learn a fighting game, so I'm not going to buy it. Um,
Yeah, that's the main thing, right?
mhm.
I know I have to put in a bunch of time at the beginning before I can
Yes,
even really play this as it's meant to be played.
and I think at the beginning is kind of the big point, which I want to talk about later. But
Okay.
I still think that if you actually break it down, that barrier is not insurmountable the way it kind of seems.
Okay.
Um,
Explain.
because so there's there's a couple of examples. But I think the fundamental idea is the actual motion, the motion inputs, learning about the combos, that stuff. If you took a class on it, if you went to college and you say, "Oh, I'm taking a class on how to play this game because I needed to graduate and I have to sit down and actually study it, like work,"
Uh-huh.
you can learn it in like 2 days, right?
Okay.
You can
Okay.
you can like learn, not that you can be good at doing it, but you can learn all the important stuff. You can do them all once. You can know how to
Yeah, you
practice to
don't
get
need
better at
multiple
it.
degrees or anything.
Right, exactly. You can learn it. I mean, in reality, you can learn it in like 2 hours, right? If you're experienced with like learning how to play games and asking the right question and things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
learning how it works and being able to do it in the moment is
right.
a big difference too, though.
But I would also similarly say that like once you know how to do it and you kind of like experience some of the things that come up, you are able to play the game at that point,
Mhm.
the way
Yeah,
it's meant to
okay.
be played, right? Like it's like okay, so you learned how to do all the inputs. You uh, you did one simple, very basic, 3-hit combo. Now you can play the
Mhm.
game more or less,
Yeah, now
right?
now maybe you know a character or two's
Right.
specials and
hmm
supers,
Now,
but
now
you
when you
probably don't
get
know
into,
everybody's.
and the most important thing is like now when you sit down with your brother or your sister and you're playing, you're like, oh, I want to do a fireball. I know how to do that. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
let me try. I learned this cool thing and I can do it, right? And that's, I think that part is not nearly as high as people make out to be. And if you are happy enough to kind of get to that point and just start playing, I think you can do well. But uh,
Hmm.
that process is often daunting. Getting there is often daunting in and of itself.
It is, and
Mhm.
I don't know if I agree that it's not as high as people make it out to be.
That's a totally
The
subjective assessment,
Yeah,
right? Like it
the
depends on how who the people are basically
yeah,
and
and
how
just the
high.
fact that you really have to like you feel as though you got to commit to a game for a while, right? Like
Yes,
because
that's true.
you can't just I mean there are skills that are transferable to other games, but in terms of like the combos and the specials you can do, you're gonna be learning something new, right? Every time you pick up a new
That's true.
game.
I would say that's exciting for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um, like a lot of people, I think I include myself in this, but definitely the people, for example, I play like high, end game Lost Ark with. They like just trying this new competitive game and trying to get good at it, right? And I think that's
Hmm.
exciting
Hmm.
for a lot of people. I At the same time, that's also very difficult for a lot of people, which totally makes sense.
Yeah, that's like a pretty competitive mindset, which
Hmm.
that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And there is, I mean, there are some advantages of like the series, like Street
Yeah.
Fighter. Your characters for the most part have the same button inputs that they've had since number two or three.
And
Um,
it's
Same with
also
Smash.
true. Oh, I would say it's also true of fighting games in general. Like any fighting game with directional inputs, um, generally use the same directional inputs, right? So obviously
Yeah,
there's a
like
bit
if I'm
of,
playing a brand new game, I'll start doing
hmm
quarter circle backs,
yep.
punch, and quarter circle forward kicks or whatever.
That's sort of,
Actually, reverse those.
yeah, exactly. I shared that video with you about what it's like for a non-gamer to play video games, right?
Yeah, yeah, that
And
was
I think
interesting.
it can also apply to a non-fighting game player playing fighting games. If you've played fighting games for a long time, you just know kind of how the system basically works, and you can learn very
Mhm.
quickly. Someone who's totally new has no idea how to even move, right, or block.
No fighting game is that radically different from the
Yes.
first Street Fighter 2
Not
game that
even
a lot.
Smash, right? Not even Smash.
Yeah, Smash is the closest to being a really new set of rules, but it's still
Right.
pretty similar.
Right. Um, and I think so I would say, obviously, how high that barrier is for you depends. But
Uh-huh.
I think the one thing that we can objectively say is like, okay, if you actually do the boring thing and sit and practice and learn a little bit and have someone guide you through it, you can learn how to do everything in like 2 hours, which
When
which
you
is
say
daunting.
everything, what do you
Oh,
mean?
I mean all the basics. Yeah, not
So like that
you can
combos
look at
exist. You
yeah.
can here's how to throw a fireball.
Let's put it this way. Like if I show you like the hardest combo ever,
Hmm.
um, even if you can't do it, you understand everything that was done, right?
Yeah,
If
okay.
you
Yeah.
put in a little bit of time, right? Like you at least know enough to be like, oh, I understand what happened. I know how to do this, even if I can't do it consistently or
Right.
fast enough, right? But I can understand what happened. Which, okay, 2 hours, and give or take depending on your experience with games, but like that's already a daunting task. I mean, a lot of people don't even play a game they bought for 2 hours, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
it is not something you have to dedicate a month of your life to, which I think is a lot of how it's portrayed.
Yeah, and I mean it kind of depends what level you want to get into it though, right?
Right, right,
Because if you're the type of person that's like, oh well, I want to know how to be the best and how to beat everybody, that's a whole other level of
right, exactly.
research
Uh,
and
and
practice.
that's a lifelong thing, right? That's a
Yeah.
lifestyle more than playing a game.
Yeah, the lifestyle.
And one more thing I want to mention though is that the existence of training mode causes this problem too,
Hmm. Where people see
which
training mode and they're like, oh man, this is gonna take a
yes,
while. Well,
and the community contributes to this too, right? There's a pretty vocal segment of the community that's like, well, you have to, you can't just learn by playing the game. You have to sit in training mode and learn all your combos and everything before you can go online.
yeah. I mean, you kind of do. Or do
I
you
don't
disagree?
agree. Actually, I
Okay.
actually very much don't agree. Because you do if you want to. Well, first of all, if you do that, you're not gonna win anyway. But you do that if you're not willing to lose and be embarrassed, right?
Okay.
If you're not willing to just get run over, if you're like, okay, I never want to just get run over by someone and everything before. I'm going to study everything before I experience it for the first time because I want to be prepared for anything that happens. I think that's kind of the prevailing attitude with people that are like, well, you need to do training mode for 16 hours before you can play online.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I don't agree with that one, but
right.
it does feel like at the very least, I want to know what moves I have,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's kind of where the 2 hours thing comes in. Where it's like, okay, you can spend a little bit of time in training mode. You can learn all
Mhm.
your moves. You can learn how to block, right? But you don't need to grind it for. And it's easy to put a number out. You don't need to grind it for more than an hour. Maybe not even like 30 minutes if your goal is just to get online and start playing and seeing what you can do, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I think that's a very strong. There's like I said, there's a very strong segment of the community that does that. It's like gatekeeping, basically, right? Like you are not, you're not worthy to play online until you've done this.
Right. Right.
A very
Yes. Yeah.
similar thing happens in, I don't know if it happens in League, but it happens in Dota a lot, right? People in lower brackets are like, you are, and obviously this is a bigger problem because of the team game. It's like, you are ruining my game because you don't know what you're doing in my team. You need to go play
Yeah.
co-op
Go
versus
play.
AI.
Yeah. Go play bots.
Yeah, go play bots for, a month, uh, and also uninstall the game and kill yourself before you get back
Yeah.
into this game, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's
I got a lot of that
this is
in
yeah this
League.
is this is something Sajam. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I got a lot of that in League.
Yeah,
People tell me to
yeah.
go back to bots.
That's well, it do be like that. And
Yeah.
this is something Sajam, who's a fighting game content creator, addressed in one of his videos, which is like, you don't, especially in a non-team game, like there's no like you should just go and get your ass kicked.
Hmm.
There's no shame in that. Hopefully you don't actually get your ass kicked, but hopefully you're playing with someone that's also like relatively new. But
Hmm.
it's okay to just go in with no plan and hopefully not mash buttons, but mash buttons, right? And kind of
Yeah, yeah,
see,
I,
test the
I agree with
limits
that.
of,
You gotta get a feel for it.
right, exactly.
You can't just read it all in a book. This
Exactly,
reminds
exactly.
me, when we got when my friends and I first got Super Smash Brothers on 64, we made a gentleman's agreement to not play when we weren't all playing. So,
Okay.
like, don't practice while we're not together, so
Yeah,
that we all stay relatively at the same skill level to
right.
keep it interesting. And I don't know. That's the only time I've ever done that, and I thought it was good. I don't
I
know if
think it
they
I think it can be
cheated
good.
or not.
What's funny is I someone actually said that to me like fairly recently. I guess it was
Oh.
pre-pandemic, it's not that recently, but I was at someone's house back when I used to go outside,
Hmm.
and they had friends. We had like friends over. It was like some dinner party thing, and there was Ultimate, and someone was like, "You practice?" As in like, "Wow, you're actually a cringe tryhard."
Yeah, yeah,
this was in our parlance we call them normies, right? Um,
yeah, yeah.
but that
Cringe.
attitude still exists. There's this idea that like practicing is not cool, right? You need to
Oh,
go
absolutely. I
only
mean,
on talent and
we're only
intuition.
fairly recently in history getting to the point where like playing video games for recreation is not considered the nerdiest thing you can do. It's still
Right,
nerdy, but
right,
I
right.
mean, when I was a kid, like you could be embarrassed that you even played video games.
Oh yeah. I think I moved just barely past that when I was a kid, but it was still
Yeah,
very
good.
definitely very strong.
Yeah.
Um, so
But yeah,
yeah,
the actually practicing to play,
hmm
just playing by yourself and
it's not fun, right? That's the whole point. Like that is what
yeah, you're
the
not having
grind
fun.
is.
Yeah, you're
Exactly. You're
grinding.
not having fun. You're having fun in training mode when you're like, oh, I saw something weird. Let me test this. Let me figure out how
Hmm.
this works, right? But when you're just starting and you have no idea what's going on and you're just sitting there by yourself, that is like
Hmm.
one of the least fun experiences you can have. And I think that turns people away. But I would say the community is making you do that. Or you're making yourself do that. You don't have to do that. As long as there's new players to also play against, right? That may be more of a problem.
You don't have to do that. You
You
don't
don't have
need to
to do that to
practice to
play online. You
participate.
don't have to do that
Yeah,
to have fun playing the game. That's what
yeah,
I mean, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's true. You
and
there's a limit to that though. I think you'll hit. I don't know if it'll go on forever.
right, right,
I'm
right. Yeah,
feeling
you'll
that
hit a
way.
wall where like if you're a pure button masher, you'll hit a wall very quickly, right? Where it's like, well, I'm not learning anything. I'm just mashing whatever buttons are on screen, and hopefully it works, right? But
Yeah.
if you move a little bit beyond that, if you're like, oh, well, I know how to do my moves. I'm trying to do them intentionally. I played online and I won some games and I lost, but I can't beat people at this level because, man, all they do is block. It's so cheap, right? That's the
Yeah.
point where you do need to go back and either, maybe not even go to training mode, but like uh, learn something, right? Learn something, learn how to
Yeah.
beat it.
Yeah. Make it
And
cheap. You know, Dalsim was considered a cheap character. I don't know if he is
uh,
anymore, but
isn't he
in two,
well, in which game?
in Street Fighter 2, his long arms and stuff.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
are like,
yeah.
oh,
I
that's
mean, all
cheating. I didn't
zoners,
even
all zoners are considered cheap characters, right?
until you can
That's kind of how
realize
it
you can
goes.
counter half of his stuff.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the Super Turbo meta, but all I know is you get hit and you die in Super Turbo. That's about the extent.
You mean like there's long combos or big health trunks?
There's TOD, Touch of Death. Uh, it's a Touch of Death game, right? Is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong.
Where
I don't
there's
know
like
anything about Super Turbo.
a one hit kill?
Yeah, where no, where it's like as soon as you get hit, there's generally a combo that will kill you no, from full life.
Oh, not when or not at the level I played at, but
Oh well,
that
sure, yeah, yeah,
may
yeah.
very well be. Yeah.
Right at the optimized level. Um,
Yeah. I learned all the infinite combos for SVC Chaos though. That was fun.
nice. I mean, Infinite's. I guess you did say that was a very scuffed game, so I'm not surprised that it
Totally.
has
Yeah,
Infinite.
there's a bunch of unblockable attacks and stuff like that.
Yeah. So like I said, I think just training mode existing contributes to this problem, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't think you can solve, but it makes me kind of think about like Riot was at some point very anti-training mode, right?
Hmm.
I think maybe because of the specific issue. Now, I don't think you can leave it out in a fighting game. Probably not in League of Legends either, but it does contribute this problem. So
Yeah,
one other thing,
it seems like a really expected feature now.
yeah, yeah. I don't think you can. I think you just have to live with it, and right, and try to solve it by changing the community rather than changing removing the feature. It's like
Yeah,
prohibition.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I want to mention one thing for Lost Ark. There's no practice mode, and you can only do a raid on the character once a week, or you can only clear it once a week.
Right. So when
Right.
you're doing it, this is your shot for the week.
Mm-hmm. So
Does or do other MMOs have practice mode? I didn't even think about that
no,
as being a thing.
no, not really. But
Okay.
so it's not a Lost Ark unique thing, I guess. But
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of people want practice mode. It's like I was playing with someone like a while ago who's like, well, why can't I just go in and practice, man? Especially after I clear. I just want to learn this fight and like be good. But I
Hmm.
think not having that kind of is the other end of this problem, which is like, okay, it kind of reduces gatekeeping, right? Like when you can make a party that's like, this is a learning party. This is a party for
Hmm.
people who have not experienced a fight, right? Whereas otherwise, you might have a lot of, and this still happens, right? But it's about mitigating rather than eliminating. You're mitigating the gatekeeping, where it's like, okay, well, you're not going to get at any parties until you prove that you've spent 2 hours in training mode, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
think
Not
that's
having it slows that down, like because
right,
people are the experts can play it once a week and get good at it, but it's just
right,
not going to be the same as
right,
they can play it all the time.
uh,
Yeah. I think that's a good. That sounds like a good thing for this type of game.
right. Um, so that's kind of I think the factors that contribute to not going so well.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I've definitely run in just anecdotally, I've run into people having this perception of fighting games as well, where they're just
mhm,
like, I don't even want to try it. Just you guys
yeah,
are too good or whatever. It just looks
and
like
I
I'll get
think
my ass kicked and it'll be not fun.
that I think that is a real problem. We'll talk about barrier
Yeah.
to entry. Actually, I think we can just skip a couple of these things in the
Okay.
interest of time, and we can just go straight to barrier to entry because it is very relevant to what we just talked about, which is so there is I think there is a very obvious barrier to entry for fighting games, right? Even if you
Hmm.
take the um, most generous perception. Um,
Hmm.
and I kind of boil it down to uh, three main issues, which are the skill gap, and similar to the skill gap, not being new players, and then directional inputs. Um,
Okay.
which
Hmm.
one do you want to start with?
Let's just start from the top here.
All right, so um, skill gap, like we just talked about. You have this experience where you have a new player and he says, or he or she or they say, wow, you guys are too good, I'm just gonna get my ass kicked. And that is unfortunately true, right?
Mhm.
That's not a false assumption. That is actually what
Yeah,
happens if
you
you
will
play with
get
people
your
that
ass
are better
kicked,
than you.
or you
Yes.
can button mash and get lucky. You know.
Right. Which, oh, by the way, I have this anecdotal story. In college, when I was first learning to play games, or
Hmm.
fighting games, I was playing Ultimate Marvel versus I can't say this name.
UMVC
Like
three.
seriously, UMVC 3, Ultimate Marvel versus Capcom 3. And I was like practicing, and like I was affected by this gatekeeping. So I was like in training mode and practicing, and like I would
Did you
sometimes play
have
with my
your own
roommates,
copy?
yeah, who would see me. Yeah, I got
Oh,
my own
oh.
copy.
Hmm.
So, and my roommate, I would play against this one roommate who would literally just button mash and beat me, and I would get so
Yeah.
mad
Yeah.
because I didn't know enough to know how to counter it. I only knew how to do like some basic things,
Right.
but so that actually makes me think, the whole thing about skill-based matchmaking is that it's not fun to have a game with a bunch of sweat lords, right? But let me tell you, or like losing to a bunch of sweat lords. But if you are trying hard to win and you're getting beat by someone who is not trying to win and just pressing random buttons, I
Yeah,
mean
it
that
feels
is
real bad.
so much worse of an experience than losing to someone who's trying hard.
Yeah, there definitely
Um,
is like a level of skill you get to where you can start dismantling button mashers a little
right.
easier, or be able to handle them easier. And that's a good feeling when you get there, if you get
Yeah.
there.
And that's kind of that's pretty early on, right? That's if you learn and sort of try things and hopefully manage your frustration, that is pretty early on it, and it teaches you about the basics of the game. But a lot of people don't get there, right? Which is understandable because it takes a lot
Well,
of
and
work.
in the reverse of this though, like if I'm just kicking someone's ass, I probably will have fun doing that,
That's
won't I?
true. Yeah, that is true. I mean, the
If it's
roommate
not your
in
friend
question,
who's like, "This sucks, you suck,
yeah,
fuck you."
the roommate in question did in fact have a lot of fun kicking my ass. So,
Yeah,
um,
I'm sure. Well, especially if your opponent gets mad.
yeah, I mean that's definitely true. Um, but anyway, so basically, when this kind of gap exists in a variety of ways, it's just not fun for at least one, sometimes two of the players, right? Like if
Hmm.
you're an experienced player and just beating up your newbie friend, that's not fun. Probably. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
depends on what
yeah.
kind of person you are. But I think
Maybe
I
the
would say for most
yeah,
people, not exactly an enjoyable time. I mean, you're more likely to try to teach them something, right? If they're actually your friend
yeah.
and
I'd
try to
more
like
enjoy
guide
that
them.
online or
Yeah.
playing a rando.
So if we kind of compare it, so if we have a game with zero skill correlation, like pure gambling,
Hmm.
this can't happen, right? Because you can't be good at a pure gambling game, like flipping a coin or like,
Well, if
uh,
you're, born lucky, of course.
well, sure, yeah. Um, and pure gambling is a gambling game where you're not making strategic decisions, so like poker doesn't count.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other hand, you have even more skill correlation games, which is like we mentioned before, chess, right?
Hmm.
Um, so in chess, this obviously a very similar thing can happen, right? It's similarly very studious, uh,
Hmm.
but if you learn the basic rules of the game, you can play, and that takes like fighting games. I would argue you can play all the legal moves very quickly, right?
Hmm.
You just don't know much about what you're doing. Um,
Yeah, and you and a friend of the same or similar skill level could just pick it
right,
up and have fun.
exactly. Um, I think one of the differences, though, is that chess has a very strong academic culture. Like the culture of chess is very much that, like, the point of chess is that you kind of study and learn and get good. It's more
Yeah,
like a
people
toy than a
pretend it's
game,
like a people pretend it's like a
like a brain
matches
exercise.
matches to your IQ or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You're definitely getting
Uh,
good at chess. I don't know about more than that.
well, yeah, that's certainly true. But because it has this academic culture, the attitude is not the same as when they play a fighting game. A lot of people come in
Hmm.
with a fighting game with the expectation that it's going to be a game, right?
Yeah.
Not something that you put time into and study. Whereas, so for example, uh, chess.com, which is now the biggest online chess company, they do a lot of content. One of the things they did was they do tournaments called PogChamps, which is
Hmm.
very slightly cringe, as the kids say. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
they just
Poggers.
invite a bunch of streamers that have no experience with chess or minimal experience in chess, and they kind of train for some amount of time, and then they play against each other, right, in a
Oh,
tournament.
interesting. Okay.
And some of the most popular chess content that exists is these streamers getting lessons from GMs, right?
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. It's like really that's the most accessible, right? Content.
Right. But that's in stark contrast to fighting games, right? Like it's hard to imagine that, uh, you know, who's a popular streamer, Ninja Fortnite, sitting in
Hmm.
training mode with like a top player, getting basically what's a lecture for 45 minutes is going to be the most compelling content, right? But that kind of content does really well in chess,
Interesting.
or historically has done sometimes.
There's also the layer of chess. If you don't know how to play and you watch it, it's not there's nothing interesting to see. If you don't know how to play a fighting game, though, there's still
That's
interesting
true.
shit to look at, right?
Yeah, you can just look at the explosion in the screen. I mean, that's how a lot of people get into. That's how I got into fighting games, right?
Like I don't know how to do Guilty Gear or Blaze Blue, but they're fun to watch.
Right, for sure. And I guess that's kind of the attraction as well. Um, but yeah, so it's not. I would say this idea that because if you play better people, you will lose. It's not an insurmountable barrier, right? There's definitely, I think chess, for example, has proven that as long as you match with people that are similar level to you, as long as you have the right attitude going in, it's not just studying. You can have fun just playing the game, right?
Yeah.
So There's one more anecdote, or there's actually a couple anecdote, which is there was this Reddit post that got really popular. I think Sage did some videos on it, where a teacher, like I forget the grade, I think sixth grade, fourth grade, teacher just brought in, I think it was Guilty Gear Xrd,
Hmm.
but one of the Guilty Gear games into their classroom and just kind of had their kids play it during their free time.
Uh-huh.
And they were all, the kids obviously all enjoyed it because they get to
Sure.
play a video game in class for a whole year. And he kind of didn't tell them anything, didn't teach them anything except like the basic controls, I would assume.
Hmm.
And he kind of just watched them all learn the game over the course of the year, right?
Oh, so it was throughout the year.
Yeah. So it
Wow.
was a whole saga. Um,
Hmm.
and that's very fun, even though they're playing at a very low level, right? And every once in a while, he would go in and beat them up, right? Because they
Yeah,
would
yeah.
ask him to. But I think that's a very good example of how if you just have people of a similar skill level, it's very fun. It's
Yeah, and
fun to
it can be any skill level in
right
that case, right?
at
Like,
any skill, right? Even from total beginner, it's fun. At a medium level, it's fun. At a you know tournament goer level, it's fun. At the very top, it's fun, right? You have
yeah, I
people.
mean that's why the what we did with Super Smash Brothers is so memorable for me
Hmm.
is like we continually were good matches for each other
Yep.
and over months and months and months, which doesn't always happen with games
Right. Right.
and your friends.
For sure. For sure. Um, so yeah. So there was also similar. There was a stream. There was like a streamers try fighting games thing. I don't know much about that. I don't know how well that did, but anyway, the point. So first of all, this is like the strongest defense of skill-based matchmaking, right? If you don't have friends that are similar level to you, hopefully you can
Hmm.
go online and play against people that are similar level to you and have a good time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Without either being way better or way worse.
Yeah.
Um, However, there is a problem, which is that
What?
fighting game communities can be very small, especially if you play an esoteric fighting game, right? Or
Yes.
an old
Yes.
fighting game. And there is definitely you need a certain critical mass to have this experience. And it's it's not that big, but it's a lot of communities don't hit this mass, right?
Meaning if you're like a new person, you just
Yeah,
get
if you're a new
queued
person
up
and you
with
don't
someone who's played a bunch, no matter
mhm.
what.
If you're a new person and you just saw it on the stream and your friends aren't interested in trying it and you just buy it and you're like, let's try to get into it.
Hmm.
Uh, if the community is small and you hit the matchmaking button, you may not ever find someone that's your level, or you may not
Yeah.
find someone that's your level very much, right?
Yeah, and there's
Uh,
I think a surprising amount of fighting games for how small the market may be.
yeah,
Like,
I think they're kind of like that is a good point. I wonder why that is. I mean, my intuition is that it's like, for example, like point and click adventure games where it's like there's
hmm,
a certain number of people that would just try to play all of them, or like you said you try to play every beat 'em up, right?
yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's kind of what it is, where it's like that this is a strong community that tries a lot of games just to have them and for
Right.
fun.
So your assumption is like if they're currently a fighting game player, they'll
Yeah,
try the new thing. Yeah.
right. And
Yeah,
you'll,
that could very well be.
uh, but I don't know if that's actually. I mean, I hope that people make games because it's fun, but also maybe it's not even that hard to make. I don't actually know much about the dev part, but
Yeah, me neither. Am I wrong in saying that most fighting game series come out of Japan, or are there just as many?
series, yes, series, vast majority come out of Japan,
I wonder
because
if there's any sort of cultural like this is the ultimate in one-on-one skill
I
game.
think
I don't
there
know.
is. Well, Japan still to this day has a strong arcade culture. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it?
so,
Yeah, they still have those fighting games where they have
mhm.
uh, screens back to back with each other. So
Yep, yep,
unlike in America where you stand right next to someone, in fact, you might be touching them,
right. Actually,
which is
similarly,
different.
Korea also has similar things, but with a limited subset of fighting games, mostly Tekken. But
Huh.
series do come out of Japan because that's where all the companies are. So ArcSys makes the most of the anime games.
Hmm.
Arc System Works. Capcom is Capcom. Konami is Tekken.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Nintendo is Smash, and all of these are Japanese companies, right? And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, but I'm saying there's maybe there's a reason that those are Japanese
Yeah,
companies
for
to begin
sure.
with. Like I'm trying to think of what Mortal Kombat is an
Mortal
American. That's
Kombat is
mid
the one.
or
Yeah,
was Midway. I don't know what it is now. Uh, and Killer Instinct probably is
right.
American.
I don't know about Soul Calibur, but I think that's Japanese also.
I think so. I think that's a Japanese game. Yeah. Ooh, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know anything about 3D games to be honest, so couldn't uh,
Uh,
couldn't
that
tell
was
you
Soul Calibur
past
2. I was a
past.
good button masher. I'd learned
Oh,
I'd learned the moves that had the longest reach and were like sweep moves and stuff.
oh yeah. That's how I first got good actually. In Skullgirls, I basically got good by kind of sticking to that game plan, which is like, okay, I know this one button goes really far,
Yeah,
and I'm going to kind of build my game plan around this
I'm
button,
just gonna
which
abuse that and yeah.
which is basically like I think the healthiest way to learn a fighting game. Like Sajam's theory is basically very similar, which is like, okay, you play against a person and you have two plans, right? When they walk at you, you press this button. When they jump at you, you press this other button, and then the
Hmm.
rest of the time you block, right? And that's
Okay, yeah, it's the basics.
basically giving you grounding to know that like, okay, I know this thing is good, I know this is good, and once I can do that consistently, then build up on it one at a time or one step at a time.
And it's Bandai Namco that's Soul Calibur.
I see. Yeah,
Bandai
so
Namco.
I guess a large part of it also is that like they got these IPs in early, right? And now they're sustained, so it's hard to create a new IP that's competitive with it, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
fine. But yeah, they do seem to mostly come to Japan. But from a community angle, we talked about how you kind of need a critical mass to have enough people at different skill levels to play against each other.
Hmm.
And not all of them are going to like each other. So hopefully you need enough of them that some of them can like each other and like create the community part, right?
Right.
Um, there's a lot because of that. There's a lot of problems with getting in, especially when you're alone, right? Like if you don't have a friend, then it's hard to get in. It's hard to be interested in the first place, right? Because you kind of need, like, I think a very important thing is you need someone to kind of tell you what to do when you're starting out. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
or
Could that could be as simple as like a streamer you like
yeah,
though too, right?
definitely. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like a streamer can make content, and I think that kind of thing is very important about like what to do when you first start out. That's definitely true.
But yeah, like to your point about it having a daunting barrier to entry, or at least perceived, having a friend get you through that hump can help a ton.
Yeah, for sure. Similarly, when your friend quits, when that friend quits, which happens a lot, it's hard to stay in, right?
Yeah,
Hope you need to have made some new friends at some point. But
yeah.
similarly, it's actually very so. A lot of fighting games have very bad. The jargon is netcode, but basically online play. Um,
Hmm.
there's like Ultimate, very bad. Street Fighter Five, moderately bad, for example. Um,
Well, my question about that is, so online play is where I more or less stopped. Like I just never
mhm,
had any interest
Yeah.
in playing randos. I want to play people I know or I can
hmm
see. I don't know.
hmm
But yeah, the netcode. Is there actually a game with good netcode? Like,
Yes.
can it ever work
Yes.
to?
Yes, it can.
Okay, go on.
Um, so this will be a little technical. This was
Hmm.
my area of experience. So the sort of there's two different kinds of netcode. So the problem with fighting games online, as you can imagine, is the lag, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, these are games that require frame perfect
right.
inputs.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily require, but at the high level, yes, right.
Yeah,
You're
at the
you're
high
doing
level. And
something in some number of frames, which is like 1/60th to one 20th of a second, right? You need to do
yeah,
the
and
right
you're
thing all the
reacting
time.
to things coming at you
Yeah,
very fast. Yeah.
exactly. So that's the problem with online. So there's two netcode paradigms. The historical paradigm is called delay-based netcode, which
Uh-huh.
means in order for it to be fair, you basically uh, wait some amount of time before your input goes in. And what that does is kind of like both players if there's a difference in connection, both players kind of feel the same amount of delay,
Okay.
if that
Okay.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
if there's like 7 seconds of not 7 seconds, if there's like 7 milliseconds of connection delay between you and the person on, for example, the East Coast or whatever,
Hmm.
there's some amount of delay where it kind of, by making it so that your move comes out, you know 3 milliseconds slower, you kind of cut into that 7 millisecond buffer, right,
And
difference.
that like that changes based on how much lag you're getting, or
It depends
does it
on the
have anything to do with your
implementation.
opponent's lag?
It depends. So usually you can set it like, okay, I
Hmm.
want X frames of delay. Um,
Hmm.
and the point is that, like, because if you didn't have this, the person, like, usually historically it was hosted by a person. Like, you connect to another person, and that person would have uh, zero delay because they're on their own computer,
Right.
but their computer or their console, but their console computer would have to wait, or you'll get your inputs the amount of time that uh, your ping is, basically, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So they get to do everything immediately. You get to do something with a 7 frame delay. And so delay based is sort of equalizing that, where both players get the amount of delay, but the lag is compensated for by the delay, if that makes sense.
Right. So in theory, both of you are
Are
experiencing the
on an
same
even,
feel
yeah,
of
you're
slowdown.
on an even playing field, but the playing field sucks, right?
Yeah.
Or you
So it
have to
doesn't,
learn to get, yeah,
well, I think you were about to say it, but you're essentially learning to play
yes,
slightly differently than you would in person then.
yep, exactly. And
God,
that was
that's rough.
historically a big problem. Yeah, it's a problem, especially, I mean, it's fine at the low levels, right? But when you get to the top level,
Yeah.
it's almost unplayable, right? Because your
Hmm. Hmm.
tournaments are all in person. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
so the new paradigm, and this was sort of revolutionary. It came out, I think, in like 2016-ish. It's called
Hmm.
delay-based netcode, or rollback, if you've heard of the term rollback. Um,
Uh,
so the way this works is there is no more delay. Everything comes out instantly. The
mhm.
game predicts. So consider this scenario, right? Your opponent is jumping at you, right? They're in a
Oh
jump
shit.
animation. They're coming at you.
Hmm.
The game knows exactly what's going to happen for the remainder of the jump animation, right?
Hmm.
They can't. Let's suppose that they can't do anything that's different there. So there's
Like
no
they can't throw out a
reason.
punch. Okay.
Assuming they can't. Obviously, in a normal jump, you can't. But assuming that they're in some animation that they can't do anything out of, the game knows
Uh-huh.
what's going to happen. So there's no reason for the game in that situation to wait to confirm that they didn't do anything, right? On your side, even if you don't yet know what the other person is doing, you can uh, your game should be able to just play it without waiting for anything, basically, right?
Okay.
So the way delay-based netcode works is taking that idea. So both players have no delay. The game predicts based on, not necessarily predicts, but like continues to play based on what either it thinks is going to happen or what happens before, until it receives a signal, and then it hopefully receive the same signal, right? If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Um, it's not necessarily predictive, right?
But it
But
wouldn't like predict
yeah, it doesn't
another
predict like what they're
move
going
or
to do.
anything. Yeah.
If it's really laggy, they'll just stand still, right?
Yeah.
But basically, the fundamental way it works is, the reason it's called rollback is if the game uh, gets out of sync with your opponent somehow, if it detects that they
Mm.
did something, it will sort of go back in time and put that thing out. So let's say you have a really laggy connection, and
Hmm.
you're both standing in neutral, and your opponent throws out a punch, right?
Hmm.
If you're really laggy, um, you if you're really laggy, you would see them standing still, and then the way rollback works is like, oh, they sent a punch 30 milliseconds ago, and then they would basically go back in time 30 milliseconds and put on your screen what would have happened if um, what was supposed to happen. So the punch will basically just appear, right, in the very naive implementation of rollback, if that makes sense. So it's like,
Okay.
oh,
And
30
that
seconds ago they threw out this, or 30 milliseconds ago they threw out this punch. oh shit, I didn't put that on the screen. Let me put the punch, 30 milliseconds into it now.
But it only happens once they know, once the game knows you're connected again, essentially, like, and you can
Yeah,
move.
yeah. So you
So
can,
you're
well,
not getting
basically
hit
on your
while
end,
sitting still.
yeah. So on your end, you're just playing normally. On their end, they're also just playing normally. What happens with rollback is if you're out of sync, you can sometimes just teleport somewhere, right? Like on your
Okay,
screen,
yeah.
they were block. So a good example is holding a block, right? Like if your opponent is holding a block, um, rollback will think that they're just going to keep holding the block forever. So you
Right.
throw out an overhead, right? And you hit them in the block. But then if there's a out of sync situation, rollback says, "Oh shit, they didn't hold the block for the whole second. They actually did
Hmm.
a punch, uh, you know, when you thought they were blocking." And so it will kind of go back in time and hit you. And that's kind of the bullshit of rollback, right? It's like, oh,
Interesting.
I just got rollback into it. But
What does that, what
um,
does that appear like? It's not actually like physically TiVoing, rewinding it. It's like
no, it's not rewinding.
you just
It
jump
just
to the state or
so the state. So basically, generally speaking, what will happen is the state will be calculated. So it'll be like, okay, well, on their, you'll basically pick, because on their screen, you were also doing nothing, right?
hmm
They were blocking and you were doing nothing and they threw out a punch, right?
hmm
So it will kind of calculate what happened with assuming all the inputs went through as intended, if that
And
makes
that
sense.
works?
It does work. It works very well. There's,
Interesting.
this is a very high level explanation, right? In practice, there's a lot more advanced technology that goes in here, but this will actually work extremely well. This allows people to play almost seamlessly with people in Europe, even.
Okay. What kind of games use this? Like Guilty Gear?
So yeah, so ArcSys has been good with this.
Hmm.
So I think I don't. This might be wrong, but I think the main thing that originally used this was actually for uh, either Melee or another Smash game,
Hmm.
where
Okay.
because obviously there's no online, they kind of developed the system to allow you to play online better without delay. Um, but
Okay.
yeah, so most modern fighting games, especially ArcSys games, are have this and use it. This is probably the most requested feature by all the for
For
every
people in the
game
know.
basically
Yeah.
that want to play online. Some key exceptions are that I know of at least are Street Fighter Five, who have like a bad version of this,
Okay.
or no version of it. And
And people think
there's
that's dumb.
yeah, people are not a fan. I mean, in Street Fighter Six, hopefully they'll add it. But
Huh. Weird decision.
anyway, yeah. So that's there's that. Old
So
games obviously don't have it. So old
so there
games,
are there are ways, but it is there is still your game is going to be different though. Like, and you're going to have to get used to
yeah,
teleports and things like that.
yeah. That's
Okay.
interconnection is bad. Oh, so the thing about rollback is it kind of works. You would think that okay, well, there's so many inputs happening all the time. You're going to be wrong so much. Are you just going to be teleporting everywhere? That's kind of the assumption before this was implemented, right? But
Hmm.
kind of the insight that led to the development is that the vast majority of the time, like 80 or 90% of the time, um, in the game, it you predict correctly just by assuming that what's happening will continue to happen.
Okay. So
That makes sense.
it accounts for those situations better than just
Right.
dropping it.
So and basically it's saying in 80 to 90% of situations, there's no chance that we mess up due to
Okay.
rollback.
Okay.
So if you
Interesting.
imagine the previous scenario, it's like if you're holding a block and you press a button, uh, generally speaking, you press a button once.
Hmm.
Um, you press one button, maybe you hold the block for 5 seconds, right? Only that one button can change what occurs. Everything else, it's the same, right?
Right.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
basically,
Think I get it. Not sure.
you're making a statistical judgment that like, okay, well, most of the time this will be correct. And yes, the times we're wrong and the connection is bad, or if the connection is flaky this one time, or there's a bug and we drop something, yes, there will be bad experiences, but those should be rare enough that it's worth not having the delay, basically.
Okay. Gotcha. I think.
Um, but yeah, so how did we get here, by the way? Where are we?
I think it was a
Who am
tangent
I?
I asked about online.
Oh yeah. Oh, online play. Yeah. So if the online is bad, it's hard to stay in the community, right?
Yeah,
Because if you don't know any, even if you're in a community and you know people, but they're not next to you, I mean, it's hard to play or it's not fun to play.
and arcades just aren't really a thing anymore
Yeah.
for the most
Not
part.
in the US anyway. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah. So similarly, there's out of this, there's also a problem because a common complaint is that there are no new players to play against,
Oh yeah.
right? Yeah. People, people, if you tell people, oh, well, it's too hard, and you tell them, well, you can just play against new players that also don't do anything. You don't have to play against me. And they'll say, well, there's
Hmm.
no new players.
Yeah, you don't get that by jumping in. You don't get to
Uh,
fight a new player.
this one, this one, I don't think is true to the extent, but I think it is kind of true. For a couple of reasons. One is basically the perception that it's hard. You know, one, if, two people that would normally play against each other both hear that there's no new players and neither of them becomes a new player, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the second thing is a lot of times there's new players are with new releases, right? So Street Fighter
Yeah,
6 comes out,
you'll
a
only get
ton
the
of
new
people start
players
playing,
at the very beginning for the most part.
right? And the problem with that is, okay, so there's enough new players that you'll find a good experience, but for a lot of releases or for a smaller release, a lot of quote unquote new players are experienced fighting game players,
Right.
right? Those are people that know the controls and stuff. So it's hard to find someone at your skill level, depending on a lot of factors, and
Yeah, there's a
especially
lot
hard
of
when the
things
community is
really
small.
bouncing people off of even trying.
Yeah, uh, and
Yeah, and like even if the game has been out for a few months, you can feel like
mhm,
you missed the boat, and it's just like
right,
I'm too far
exactly,
behind.
yeah. And I do think a lot of that is like perception and like community gatekeeping, but
Yeah.
a very large portion of that is just factual the way it is, right? Which
Hmm.
um, and then the last thing I want to touch on is directional inputs, which is usually what scares people off, right?
Yeah. I mean, the notion that you have to like memorize things
Right,
because the inputs can be very long or seem long at
right,
least.
right. And a long and I think also importantly arbitrary, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
like I think of all the times I had to tried to memorize Akuma's
mhm.
uh,
Oh,
special where he like
that's true.
the screen
Yeah,
turns black.
Akuma is a separate. I mean, that's like a Easter egg, secret separate issue, right? But for even for the normal, like we kind of mentioned before, there's a pretty limited subset of commands, right? There's quarter circle forward, quarter circle back, half circles, forward in a button, direction in a button. Sometimes there's down, down. There's and then there's the DP motion, right? Um,
Yeah, and a lot of supers in Street Fighter and even
right.
like King of Fighters are like a quarter circle back, then a half circle forward, and
Sure.
all your punches or
Yeah.
whatever.
Or like
Like
I think a modern
I'll
Street.
try that in any game. If I have a super meter
Yeah.
full, I'll try that motion. Or
Yeah.
I'll just
Exactly.
spin the controller a bunch, spin the joystick
Right.
a
Right.
bunch, and hit all the buttons at the same time because that can sometimes work.
Exactly. So that's basically what that means is you built up the intuition, right? This kind
Hmm.
of goes back to the whole video game intuition thing, which is like the things we take for granted. Well, we don't do. Well, fighting game players don't do this because people complain about it so much. But in other video games, people take some of the basics for granted, right? And it takes experience to build that intuition, and then you kind of know it. Basically, you built up the intuition through learning them, and then experience with them. And now, when you have a new fighting game, they're not so foreign to you, right?
Yeah,
It's
because
kind of like
there's a lot of similarities between them
right. It's kind of like if
games.
you play a platformer and okay, well, there must be a jump button, right?
Yeah.
And the jump works this way, and there's like momentum and stuff, right? You kind of
Yeah,
understand.
or the first game 3D game you play where you move with one stick and look around with the
Hmm.
other is going to
Right,
be a
exactly.
nightmare for anyone. But
It's a nightmare,
once you get
but you
that,
learn it.
it's
Hmm.
you learn it and then it's just part of games.
Right. Um, so, so I think that's how it's overcome. But I do think it is true that they're not intuitive. So if you compare how to do specials in Smash with
Hmm.
how to do specials in uh, Street Fighter, the intuition factor is pretty big, right? So in Street Fighter, to do a fireball, you do this. Uh, like there is no connection between down, down, forward, forward, with a fireball, right? I mean, like yes, you're shooting it forward, but that's about it, right?
Yeah, his
And
arms kind of move like
it
that,
could
I
be,
guess.
it could be, yeah, but it could be basically any. It could
Yeah.
be any special, and it'd be like, okay, well, it's a special that goes forward. In Smash, you have a B button, right? The B button makes your specials.
Yeah. So B
Um,
B neutral, B up, B down.
mhm.
And there's another one, smash B.
Forward, forward, and well, both forward and back are usually the same, but
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
um, but
And
that
that's the
that
case for
makes
every single character.
yeah, but that makes a lot of intuitive sense compared to the directional input. So, for
Yeah.
example, your offs, so your let's say your fox, right? You're off
Hmm.
stage, you jump, um, and you think, okay, I need to go up. How do I go up? I press the up button and my special button, right?
Yeah, they're good about that, making
Yeah,
up feel like an up move and downs often feeling
exactly,
like a down move.
exactly, right. That's kind of a layer of like intuition designer has to sort of make it easy to learn, right? Less,
Yeah.
you don't have to think about it as much. So to do illusion, the forward B for Fox, you think, okay, I have to get over there. It's forward. I wonder what pressing forward B does, and it does kind of what you expect it to do, right?
Hmm.
If you're that's that basically is why having that extra layer of intuition helps a lot with the early part of learning the game, right?
Yep.
Obviously, once you reach mastery, it's the same, but
Uh, yeah, or same enough. I mean,
right.
like you said though, even at high level, you still see mistakes, right? Like input mistakes
You
on.
do, and that's I think that's kind of the value of this. But I think what, but to wrap up this point, I think one of the problems with directional inputs being counterintuitive or not intuitive
Hmm.
is that you have to learn it at the beginning, right?
Like ahead of
Because
time, or
yeah, either ahead of time or before you start playing, right? It's
yeah, you better
like
start reading that little note on
right,
the console, that
yeah,
cabinet
exactly.
that has their first summons.
Because if you don't learn it, you can't do the special,
Uh-huh.
right? And you can't really figure out that that's how you do the special without learning it.
Yeah, and like if you play with friends, you might be like, all right, for the first 30 seconds, I'm just gonna, or first 10 seconds, I'm gonna just learn all my
Mm-hmm.
moves and then we can
Mm-hmm.
go. But
Yeah,
you can't do that online.
exactly. Right. And that moves the burden of learning way up to the very front, which is the worst place to put it, right? Like how many even outside of fighting games, how many times have you like started a new game and it hits you with this like 15-minute tutorial and you're just like I'm done. Like I can't
Yeah, for
read another
sure.
paragraph. Exactly, right? That's the worst. That is sometimes the only, but that is really the worst way to teach someone how to play your game, right? Is to hit them with this,
Yeah, but there's
read
not
this
like,
paragraph real quick.
so real-time strategy comes to mind as like kind of a complicated thing to learn at first. Uh, but you can do it step by step, right? Like you can be
Yes,
like, all right, there's a whole level where you can only use your basic infantry or
yes,
whatever.
yes,
And
exactly.
now in the next level, we're going to teach you how to build a base. There
Mhm.
doesn't seem to be there's not really anything like that in
No,
fighting games, unless
no, there
single
isn't.
player modes have that in
That's
some way.
why I don't think we'll get to it today. We'll probably have to cut it, but that is why I think the single player content is the bridge that's needed, and it is something that basically doesn't exist in what I would consider like a competent form in any fighting
Yeah,
game.
there should be like a single player versus AI that, all right, on this level, you can only do damage with super moves, or
Exactly.
you can
Yeah, I
only beat
agree.
him with with your, or I guess special and super. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
And hopefully it's more gamified than just a tutorial, right?
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think that would be that's very important. So one thing, WoW, World of Warcraft does this really well. MMOs in
Mhm.
general, Lost Ark not so much, I guess, but Final Fantasy, WoW, the leveling experience is slow and boring. People are like, well, why do I have to level my character and play through the story for? Uh, it takes like 3 weeks, right, at
Mhm.
least,
Mhm.
unless you're rushing.
For your
before I can
first
do all the
character.
fun stuff, right? Like all my friends are thinking I have to do this stupid leveling stuff, but it's
Yeah.
very important. I learned this lesson when I joined. Like I used to play WoW on a private server, and then I joined a separate private server that was just for PvP, and then they start you at end game, and you just get all
Uh-huh.
your gear and stuff. I mean, it's for PvP, right? That's kind of the point.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I realized was like, holy shit! Like I took for granted how much that leveling experience, adding one skill at a time and then using it for a while, right?
Yeah.
And then adding another one, how much that was vital in learning how to play the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lost Ark had a sort of a ramp with
Yeah,
you didn't
that's true.
unlock all your skills right at the
That's true.
beginning, right?
I did forget about that. That is true. You did have one at a time.
But it's also one of those games where it's like there are things I would never figure out if I'm not using
Yeah,
some
yeah,
other info online.
right. The thing with Lost Ark also is that like there's not that much variety in the leveling content, so it's just like I can use this other skill, but why? You know,
Yeah,
like
you find the
there's
ones that
no
work. And
challenge. Like I think Final Fantasy and WoW, at least when I played WoW, do a good job of sort of like making every new skill have a purpose, have a clear
uh,
purpose, and you're just like, oh well, I can do this thing better now, or oh, I clearly need to use this skill before this other skill.
do
Um,
they?
that's
I like it when I assume this happens all the time in late game MMOs, but like you have to do. There are certain skill setups going into this dungeon that'll be
yeah,
better than others. It's not just the
yes.
highest level stuff you
Hmm.
use all the time. Yeah,
There's like a term.
that's cool.
There's a term for this. I don't remember. I don't know if we ever talked about this. I'm really anti like the video game design terminology being part of the vernacular.
You
It
mean
just
like
captures the
using
idea.
it using it casually?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree
I,
with that.
I
I
don't.
even I still bristle at RNG to be honest
Yeah, that's
because of that
that
reason.
is
Because
true.
it's like anyone hearing that will be like, "What the fuck are you talking
Yeah,
about?"
exactly. There's so many associations with it, right? You already decided that it's good or bad, and you're just like
And I
turn off your
also
brain.
I know it's not technically luck, but you could generally use the word luck in
That's
place of
true.
it in a
Yeah,
lot of places.
that is true.
Anyway,
Um,
that's my pet peeve.
that's an interesting topic for another time. Yeah, but anyway, moving basically, yeah, the point, and I think it's we both agree on this, is that putting you want to move the burden of learning as far back as you can, right? Um,
Yes, so you can actually get some time playing the
yes.
game where you don't
So
have to
you can
learn everything.
play, you can have fun using this one thing, and then and then you get this new thing. It's like, oh, this is cool. I can have more fun doing this other thing and the old thing I'm now familiar with. And directional inputs kind of forcibly put them at the beginning.
So why don't any other fighting games do what Smash does?
So there is a fighting game
Hmm.
from the company that you used to work at
Yeah, I
that
was about to bring that up. Yeah, Riot Games is Fighter. They're trying to do just that, right?
they're doing exactly that, right? They have a B button,
Yeah.
which I think is important. Like, I guess one other argument to point out is that often people say, well, directional inputs add no value, right? Like, why not just have a B button? I can see where that's coming from, but I don't think it's true that they add no value. You might think that the value they add is pointless, um, but I think they add a couple things. So one thing they add is they very significantly raise this execution ceiling. Not the same thing
Yeah.
as a skill ceiling, although very similar, right? But specifically
Uh,
with execution, it's the thing we talked about before, right? A tournament winner, an EVO winner, world champion, still makes execution mistakes because the inputs are hard,
yeah.
right? It's sort of making an arbitrary layer of difficulty around doing your move. Obviously, you can do the same thing with a B button, right? But the number of occurrences is obviously just much higher, right? So it's like, okay, well, with a B button, you can only mess up in a couple ways. You can like your stick can be too far up when you're trying to go to the side.
Yeah, in
Um,
terms of just like hit doing the wrong move.
right, yeah, like making it not doing what you intended to do, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Even after having practiced a lot. With a B button, you can make mistakes, but there's way more ways. I would say an order of magnitude more ways to make a mistake with directional inputs This causes mistakes to happen at the highest level. And it also causes people with really good execution to have sort of an identity, right? Um,
As a person that never fucks
mhm.
up. Okay.
Never fucks up or does really, really hard combos. So there is a
Like goes for the
in Street
high
Fighter
difficulty.
4,
Hmm.
uh, a lot of players that were really good in Street Fighter 4 really didn't like Street Fighter 5 because the execution barrier was so much lower. And by the
Mm.
way, there's a very interesting video on this by Korea Gaming called the like the cost of lowering the execution barrier or whatever, the
Hmm.
execution ceiling. Basically, a lot of players have put in a lot of time to. It's like okay, uh, as a human, we only have so much time to get better. I'm going to get really good at doing everything I want precisely. That means I may be
Hmm.
worse at neutral or so let's say that makes you worse at neutral, right? Which is like you're just playing the game and you're both not getting hit. So I may get fewer hits than other people, but I'm
Hmm.
going to put my time into execution. So when I do get the hit, I can always do the hardest combo consistently, and I can do
Yeah.
more damage with my one hit than my opponent can do with two hits. Right.
Right. Okay.
That's those people think it's valuable. People that make games think it's
Wait,
valuable.
so are we saying that that brings in sort of another element other than pure skill?
Yes.
It brings in like
Right.
memorization and time, muscle memory.
Uh, Practice, right? It kind of
Yeah, time
it's
practice.
like like think about it from a sports real world athlete sports perspective, right?
Hmm.
Um, by being very by being you can in real sports by being even more precise with your movements and then even more precise with your body control, you can get an advantage, right?
Yeah, you get
Uh,
little advantages. Yeah.
yeah. In chess, you can't do that, right? In poker, you can't do that. There's nothing physical you can do. Uh, Online chess is its own thing. And chess, obviously, there's like, oh, you cannot accidentally knock a piece over. But at a high
Or
level,
there's a level of skill if you can do smack talk.
well, that's definitely also
I do
true.
want to talk about that at some point too, maybe
Oh,
next time.
okay. Um, so basically, it's saying there is a physical. You're trying to increase the physical component that makes you better at a game, not just the strategic component, if that makes sense,
Yes, it makes sense.
right? So sports are very far on one side, chess is on the other side.
Mhm.
Let's say your fighting game is in the middle, and you have a B button. If you change the B button to having directional inputs, you move in the sports direction, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's if you want to do that, and I think people enjoy that and people want to do that. That's the value it adds. If you don't want to do that
Yeah,
because of the cost,
and then
right,
people high level people pulling off those moves is extra impressive
right,
when
right.
watching. Okay.
That's very true. That's a good point, actually. I didn't think about it. But that is very true and impressive. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's only impressive if you know that it's hard because it'll often look like everything else if you don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That is an unfortunate aspect as well. I didn't think about.
Yeah, the most complicated stuff isn't just doing your super, it's doing
Right.
combos in specific
Exactly. But
situations
the
and
super is the thing that looks the coolest, right? Or
yeah,
in the specials.
get the anime face and all that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Huh.
and the other thing, this is a very minor point, is just that execution or having directional input specifically makes more button economy, or like it lets you do more with the same amount of buttons, right?
Yeah,
So
you can, yeah, right. You can add new stuff kind of forever if you can do that
mhm.
much
If you just
directional stuff.
consider if even if you just have a B button, that's a special button. Well,
Hmm.
if you only have up, down, left, right, neutral, that's five. But if you
Yeah,
have up, down, left, right, neutral, quarter circle forward, quarter circle back,
yeah, you got
down,
tons.
down, half circle, DP, right? You just uh, without adding more buttons, you can do more with them, which is
So that
value.
that makes sense on paper to me, but
Hmm.
I wonder, does that actually, is that actually an issue? Like, we also
Mm,
have six, like Street Fighter also has six buttons, three punches
yes.
and three kicks,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
like, they have so much stuff they
They
could do
do.
with that that they
Yeah.
don't do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they do. I guess if you think about it, down medium kick and up medium kick are their own things from like,
Yep.
so they're not exactly special moves, but they're still
Yeah,
different
so
moves.
you have normals that change, right, based on directions. So
Yeah.
so the way Street Fighter work, the reason this kind of happened is that all the buttons are in Smash parlance A buttons, right?
Hmm.
They all do a normal, and then you have directional normals as well.
Yep.
Um, and then the specials, all the specials, there's no B button. All the specials are just the normals, but you have a directional input in front of them. Um,
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
Smash has the same thing. It actually has exactly the same thing. And I actually think Smash's paradigm is harder for me to do than
Oh, it's the
directional
stick
inputs.
movement, right?
Yeah. So Smash has
Like if you
tilt
push it over
attack.
slightly and if you push it
Yes.
over fast. Yeah.
Yes. So if you go all the way to the edge with your stick and you press A, you get a smash attack. If you
Hmm.
go halfway, I don't know exactly the amount, but if you tilt it slightly in the direction, you get a tilt attack. I
Yeah.
actually find that really hard to do, right? But it's more intuitive, which is the point. Like at some point when you want to enter a tournament, you have to learn how to do this precisely. But you don't have to learn at the beginning. You want to hit forward, you press the forward button and you press A, and some attack that goes in that direction comes out. Right.
Yeah, and there's also the smash attack in addition to all the way right or
Right.
left. Doing it
Yeah, exactly.
quickly, going from neutral to left or right, will do
Right.
an even more powerful attack. And
Right.
holding it will do another one.
Right.
Um, the uh, yeah, that's true. There is extra stuff to learn, and that you don't need to just play. But again, like that that control scheme is the same for every character. It's not like you have to
Right.
learn it. Once you learn
Right.
it, you got it,
Right.
which is not the same as Street Fighter. Like if there's a new character,
Uh,
you're going to learn new stuff.
that's
Probably.
I would actually say that's not true. I mean, they don't really
They
add
may
new
use the
directional
same.
inputs, right?
I mean, that's true, but you don't. But it's not like I can just be like, all right, up B, B, down B. I know all my moves. You have to like look up
That
what they are
yeah, that is
and
true.
remember what they are.
There's more moves, right? Which is the downside of having button economy, which is like,
Yeah.
well, you can do more with these buttons, but then you can do more with these buttons, and then you have to learn this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
you know
also,
you
one thing we didn't mention is directional inputs also add uh, not only complication but time to an input in a way
mm,
that
yes.
doesn't happen in a
Hmm.
lot of other games unless you have like a cool up
Yeah.
wind up.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Uh, and that's another level of. I mean, that's a huge part of the strategy is knowing how much time and frames I
Mm.
have to do this complicated directional input because you can't do it in all situations, right?
Yep. Yep.
Like Blanca and what's his name, the Guile,
Oh,
they
there's
have
also
the
charge
holds,
inputs. Yeah, that's
yeah, the
true.
charge
Yeah.
inputs, which you
Yep.
have to
Yep.
like really kind
Exactly.
of play
Yep.
around in a way that you don't with other characters. And it actually adds sort of an interesting wrinkle in person. If you are playing against a sort of person that will notice what you are doing with your
Hmm.
joystick, which is possible. Like I know of people
Hmm.
who do like peek at what you're doing, and if they see you holding, they know you're holding, and there's only a certain
And they
amount of
see you
things you can
folding.
do. And then they're going to see you folding soon enough. Yeah,
You got to learn when to hold them and when to
yeah,
fold
I
them.
understand.
That's true. That's actually true. In Smash as well. In a in less scenarios. One of the common places that shows up is when you're blocking and you want to do an invincible reversal, right, or a dragon
Mhm.
punch, in
Yes. Hmm.
the common parlance, because the DP motion is forward. The first motion is forward. You can't block while you do that motion. Therefore, when you are getting hit, you have to be very precise with when you buffer your DP, right?
Yes.
Because if you
Meaning like
do
you
it,
got to block and then immediately do it
yeah, you got to block
during the
immediately, or
block
you have to
animation.
do it. You have to do it when you know that they're in recovery, right?
Yes.
And you're in
Yes.
blocks, for example. So that's
Right.
that's
Right.
kind of their wrinkle. So basically, the summary is that directional inputs add execution ceiling, they add complexity, right? Um, so there's upside. That's the upside, and as we've documented, there's similarly a lot of downside, right?
Yeah. I mean, to
Uh,
your point of it not necessarily being. I mean, it is a level of skill, but like you say, it's a level of practice on top of things to know all the directional inputs. And so I guess I don't always agree with the argument that it uh, raises. raises the skill ceiling necessarily. It
I
just
guess that's
makes
true.
it,
So that's why I guess that's why we want to differentiate. Skill has a lot of components, right? So we can say there's an execution ceiling, and then there's a
yeah.
strategic ceiling, right?
Yes, yeah, okay.
It does not. It varies slight. I mean, there's the stuff we just talked about where it's like, oh, you need to know when to hold forward and when you have charge, but there's a very very small effect on the strategic ceiling, but there
Hmm.
is a massive effect on the execution ceiling. And if that's
Yeah.
what you want your game to have, then this is a good way to do it, right?
Does any other game genre do that kind of thing?
Rhythm games are all rhythm games are purely execution, right? They are 100%
Right.
execution. There's no strategy at all. You just react and you follow the beat, and it's all about how well you do that, right?
Yeah, and
And
it can
that's
be all
purely
kinds of
physical,
crazy stuff that you do have to like learn how to do.
hmm
It's not just, directions, you can have
right?
multiple
But
buttons or
other than
whatever.
that, I can't think of that many like video games genres that do this. Obviously, any
Yeah.
kind of action game. Well, actually, no, that's not true. There's a lot. Actually, I take that back. So shooting games, FPS games. There's a
Uh,
strong physical. Can you hear the cat?
yeah, I can hit a cat.
Oh well, the cat's gonna be a co-star.
That'll
That's
just get us
Chocola.
more listeners, I
He,
think. Cats are
I don't
good.
know what he needs, but
He's
uh,
talking to you.
yeah, he's talking to us. So FPS games have a strong execution element, right? Because you have to point your mouse very quickly at the spot and then click it, right? That's
Yeah, I mean that's true. There's a high execution element, but it's like this feels like an extra tacked on execution element as opposed to like
mhm. It's
a
not
an essential
intuitive,
part of the
right?
gameplay.
Exactly. That's what we keep coming back to. It's not
Yeah, you're right. It's
intuitive.
not intuitive. Yeah,
FPS is super intuitive. Your mouse is the crosshair. You click on the other person, you shoot them, right?
yeah.
This
At
one,
least if you're a PC user, it's
yes, you
something
get
you've
it,
been
right?
learning already. Yeah,
You use a mouse. Someone says, in this game, your mouse is your crosshair. You click, it shoots there. Everyone
yeah,
understands what that means, right? If you've
yeah,
used a mouse before. The thing we keep coming back to is that um, directional inputs are arbitrary. They're totally arbitrary, then they're not intuitive. There's no intuitive connection. And
yeah.
so
They're like a magical incantation for you to do your
exactly.
moves.
Yes, exactly. That's a great summary. It's a spell that you have to cast, right? That you have to
Yeah,
memorize. Um,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
but yeah, there's other games with actually, MOBAs have execution ceiling and things like, clicking accurately, doing your combo quickly, pressing your buttons in the right order. MMOs
Yeah,
similar,
last hitting.
you know, and as you get less and less action, basically it's like an action scale, right? Like the higher your game is action, the more execution ceiling, and the more your game is turn based or card based or tactics, the less execution there is until you get to chess, right? And chess is zero, in theory.
Yeah, yeah. And again, though, I mean, I think we're agreeing, but again, like all those other examples, like the gameplay is more complicated
Right.
itself rather than
Right.
it's on top of the gameplay. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And the gameplay in fighting games is already complicated enough, right? Like as soon as you get past the beginner level and you start learning about what people do, I mean,
It's really
uh,
kind of weird to think about how much and how long this has been a convention of the genre,
right?
and that there's just not other like no, I can't even think of did people try did any companies try fighting games that were simplified away from
Yeah.
directional inputs?
Well, well, first of all, there's Smash, right? As we've
Yeah,
talked about,
Smash.
but
Yeah.
there's sort of like, what do you call them? Like there's a word. It means uh like research games, maybe. I don't know, but
Hmm.
like Dive Kick, for example, that's definitely not the right word, but it's sort of a game that's there to kind of make a point, right? And Dive Kick is that, for example, or footsies, very similar, where
What's the
uh,
point?
the point of Dive Kick is that, like, well, you can have a lot of what makes fighting games interesting with two buttons, right?
Ah, yeah.
Not even directions, just jump and kick or dive and kick, right?
Did you know that the original Street Fighter arcade game, the first version of it, had just two buttons and a
Really
joystick?
interesting.
Yeah, it had a
Oh,
punch and a
actually,
kick, and they were
I
like
may know
big.
this.
And so they were also pressure sensitive. So they were like big rubber
Oh,
buttons,
I hate.
kind of. And depending on how hard you pushed it or hit it, it would do, light, medium, or hard
Yeah,
attacks. But that sucked. And also, uh, they arcade machines would get broken real fast because people were just hammering on
that's
those things.
yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna say that's how you do in Smash. There's a short hop. There's a full hop and a short hop, right? To do a short hop, you have to press the jump button lightly, and I
Oh,
hate
really?
doing that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
I
tough.
don't know about Smash. I think I'm sure it's in 64, but um, like short hop and tilt are basically like analog motions, right? Like directional
Hmm.
inputs for all their issues are like deterministic, right? Like
Yeah.
you can go into training mode, you can see, well, when my stick is here, I can go put my stick all the way to the end and all the way to the bottom, all the way to the right, and I'll hopefully get the right input, right?
Uh-huh.
Analog motions are like, well, there's a range, and in this range it does this, and in that range it does that, right? And I do not like Smash because I don't like doing that.
Interesting.
But
Uh,
again,
yeah, I guess I'm okay with that sort of finesse, but I can see how that's sort of a different kind
I
of
think it's
skill,
like a, I think
especially
it's
for
like
a
a,
PC player, like the
yeah,
stick stuff.
I do think it's like a PC versus console experience thing. Because
But then again, you
obviously, if
do
you
have a
play,
fighting stick, right?
I do have a stick. I actually use a these days, or sorry, I hate that company. Never mind. Cut that out. Bleep it out.
Okay.
I use a all button controller.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's for buttons instead of a stick. So it's like a
Oh, right. I have seen this. So there's no
yeah,
stick, but you learn how to
yeah,
move by buttons.
yeah.
Gosh, that sounds tough.
It is tough. It's again, it's very counterintuitive, right? But
But you
I have
get it.
hand pain,
After a while,
so
you
I do
it
it. Yeah,
becomes second nature, I'm sure.
that's exactly the thing, right? This is another example of like you at the end once you put in the time, you maybe you even put in the same amount of time, and you end up with the same. You end up more or less the same place, right? But in one case, you had to put in the time right at the beginning, and in another case, you can kind of learn it as you go along, right?
Right, right.
And you can rely
Yeah,
on
I mean, it
intuition,
seems like
whereas
what we're
one,
landing on is that uh, whether or not you include directional buttons, there's got to be some way to push back the learning a little bit if we're going to
mm-hmm.
expand
Yeah,
the size of this genre or the
yeah,
people who play it, or just to get new
and
people in, essentially.
that's exactly what I we should talk about next time.
All right.
I want to talk about uh, what kind of niche we can fill that fulfills sort of all these problems that we've popped out, right? We
Yeah.
landed on these
What's the
problems.
real
We
game?
landed on like high-level solutions. How can we make a game that kind of captures those things?
All
Um,
right. Yeah. All right.
and
Open
similar,
beta
I actually think
spiders.
Project L
Yeah,
is
the
doing a
Riot
lot of
Games
those
thing.
things.
Yeah.
I actually think a lot of the things I thought negatively about it, I thought about it more as we were preparing this, and I think they are doing a good job at bridging this some of the specific gaps that we've talked about.
I hope so. I mean, it certainly seems like it. I'm excited to see what they come out with.
Yeah,
Uh, I just
cool.
sent you a picture of
So,
the Street Fighter console, by the way.
oh, I did see. Yeah, I saw that. That is. I mean, that doesn't look. Honestly, it looks less bad than I was expecting, but
Uh-huh.
still not great. Um,
Yeah,
still,
it's a weird idea.
still tough. I mean, it was weird to have more than two buttons because like beat 'em ups are usually two buttons, right? Or like four buttons or something.
Yeah, jump and attack. You may have like a special, but
Yeah,
that's it.
I see.
For beat 'em
So
ups, yeah, that's about as complicated as it's ever got.
makes sense.
Uh,
All right. Well,
all right.
we're across the 2 hour mark, so we can wrap it and leave our millions of viewers um,
Yeah,
uh,
hanging.
with a cliffhanger here about how what kind of game we're going to make to try to capture or try to fix some of these problems and how we can do that and hopefully grow the genre in a different way.
Yeah, and I also want to just chat about the what the arcade experience is like
Oh
a
yeah,
little,
that'd be good.
just because
Hmm.
I spent in college, I wasted several years at the arcade, and
Several years. That's
yep. So
that's strong.
yeah,
Uh,
so I can
I
talk a
do think
little
we
bit
should
about that.
talk about the community. Actually, I think that was a
Yeah, we
important
should talk
point we
about
should
that too.
hammer, which is community is super important. All right, so thanks for listening to episode 5 of Open Betas with Regal and SwimFan. we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.